Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. And now your host, EYAL Levy.
Welcome to the URM Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. It's crazy to think that we're now on our 5th year, but it's true. And it's only because of you, the listeners. And if you'd like to see us stick around for another 5 years, there are a few simple things that you can do that would really, really help us out. And I would be endlessly appreciative. Number 1, share our episodes with your friends. If you get something out of these episodes, I'm sure they will too. So please share us with your friends. Number 2, post our episodes on your Facebook and Instagram and tag me and our guests too. My Instagram is at EYAL Levy URM Audio. And let me just let you know that we love seeing ourselves tagged in these posts. Who knows, we might even respond. And number 3, leave us reviews and 5 stars, please, anywhere you can. We especially love iTunes reviews. Once again, I want to thank you all for the years and years of loyalty. I just want you to know that we will never, ever charge you for this podcast, and I will always work as hard as possible to improve the episodes in every single way possible. All I ask in return is a share, post, and a tag. Now let's get on with it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the URM Podcast. My guest today is a titan. Thom Russo is a 16-time Grammy-winning producer, mixer, songwriter, and composer who's worked with people like Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Prince, Janet Jackson, Johnny Cash, Jay-Z, and tons of others. He became a household name in the Latin music arena, amassing a ton of Grammys and other award nominations for his work in that genre. Before we get started, I just want to let you know that there was a slight technical difficulty about 20 minutes into the podcast where we have to use the backup recorder. So you're going to notice the audio quality on Tom's mic changing. I apologize, but it is what it is. Anyways, this episode is awesome, so enjoy. Well, Thom Russo, welcome to the URM Podcast.
Hey, very glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it will. It always is. I was looking over the notes my assistant Ben took, and you said something interesting I wanted to ask you about. You said you're not into the hi-fi thing.
God, you just jumped into interesting. Oh my God. Did I say that?
Yeah, you said you don't get into the hi-fi thing because audio is amazing, but you can get lost in, I guess, the bullshit.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know. I mean, it's just that nowadays, and it's not even nowadays, I mean, in the past, whatever, decade or something, it's just everybody just gets lost in the BS of tech talk and all that stuff. By way of saying, of course, I'm into hi-fi. And of course, I mean, we make records, we make music. So, you know, of course we are. It goes without saying. But it just seems like, God, I don't know. I hope I'm making myself clear in the sense of like you just...
It's almost like people put the cart before the horse. Like they...
Big time. And I wish, in our line of work and, so much of, my occupation, I mean, like all of us, we can get lost in that. And it's just a minutia. It is really a minutia. Look, I'll talk about, all that stuff till I'm blue in the face, sampling rates and these microphones and these speakers. I mean... all by way of saying it, like in a sweeping comment about it, I'm all for, great sounding audio and great sounding equipment and blah, 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 and everything. But it's just, that seems like, the primary. You have that, you get something that works and you just move on to the next step instead of carting it before the horse, like you're saying. It just, I don't know.
Yeah, just a tool. I think that, honestly, I wasn't of age really before the internet took over, but I feel like the internet made it worse because it provides a forum for people to just argue about these things, and then also they'll read about gear. Yeah, they'll read about gear, and someone with incredible ears will say that they hear like something different. Like they hear like distortion, like cool harmonics on an API. And so everyone will be like, I need that. But when they're talking, masters of the craft are talking about those differences, we're talking about like the last 2%.
Right.
Yeah. People will read that stuff, hear that stuff and think that it makes way more of a difference than than it actually does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I'm saying. We're in completely agreement about it. And look, like there's a lot of guys, that I've known over the years and whatever, and they, I'll see them on Instagram and they'll post some really interesting stuff about, different signal processing chains that they have on, blah, 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 drums, bass, whatever. And that's cool. It's awesome, of course. And it's going to, but you're right. When it gets into all that, like, talk, like you're saying, and it's exactly that. What the internet has brought to it is, like, everybody can sit and talk about, like, I don't know, preamp shootouts for a fucking week straight instead of like, all right, well, just put it up. And if it sounds good, great. Then use it. Instead of like, getting lost in that. Like, and look, it's a different thing when you're like in the market, when you're in the market per se, it's like, okay, like, you got to shoot out, and that's true about everything. You're buying a car, you got to go drive 5 cars. You're buying produce, you're going to go to a store where you get the peaches that you like. You know what I mean? But it's the same thing. Or shopping, women with dresses. It's the same shit. It's like us with speakers, I mean, when I needed a new pair of speakers, yes, of course, I went and did shootouts and the blah, blah, blahs and the blah, blah, blahs. But, I mean,
Well, the thing that's funny is that I think generally when people argue about it, they're arguing about things that they've never tried. And so it misleads a lot of people. Like, if they're in the market, they'll post a question asking about what should I get, and then there will be like 100 replies of people just regurgitating info that they heard about a piece of gear that they never even tried, when the real answer is try it.
Yeah. Especially nowadays when, whatever, you could go in somewhere or, we can't go in anywhere right now, but, God, well, return policy, 30 days, but, fucking fire it up, listen to it. If it sucks, then move on. And if it doesn't, use it.
I always used to call it the Sweetwater rental plan.
Exactly.
I mean, what do you think the priority is? Like, when it comes to getting a great final product, if the gear is not the priority, what's the priority?
Oh, I'm not saying it's not the priority, but it's like
just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's one piece of the puzzle. And as we talk, dude, I think maybe I'm a big analogy guy, and it's kind of like, it's extremely important. It's the race car, but if you don't have the driver, then, you know what I mean?
That shit's going into the wall.
Exactly. It's going to be the greatest car that just like, boom. It makes me think about Ford versus Ferrari. If you haven't seen it.
I have.
Incredible movie, yeah. And I almost missed it because I was like, I really don't want to, I'm somewhat a car guy, but then like, I read a little of the ruse. I was like, whoa, this is pretty, yeah. Anyway.
I'm not a car guy, but I'm a Christian Bale guy.
There you go. Yeah, what a friggin', oh my God. Unbelievable. What a pro. What a super duper consummate, dedicated motherfucking pro. And my wife is an actress and a pretty accomplished one. Very accomplished, I should say. And she's just like this to him all the time. Because he just like, he's a 120%. You know what I mean? 120%.
Can we talk about acting for a second? I know that that's not what this podcast is about, but...
Of course.
All right, since you're married to an actress, I want to know something.
Okay,
so I love great movies. I really do. Like, I think that it's one of the highest...
Sorry to interrupt. Did you see Bombshell?
No. Wait, yes, I did. Yes, I did. I enjoyed it.
The Roger Ailes story, yes. Pretty intense and very, very zeitgeist in the Me Too. Do you remember the woman that played Judge Janine Perot?
Vaguely.
Okay, she had 3 scenes in it. That was my wife.
I'll go watch it again.
Yeah, you go watch it again.
That's pretty fucking cool, though.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's awesome.
That's awesome. So she does it for real.
That's very really much cool. So. Yeah, she's been since she was 11, 12, like countless movies. She's mostly a character actor, comedian, Legally Blonde, Meet the Fockers, blah, blah, blah. If you might not recognize her if you look at her, but then if you see the roles, you'll be like, holy shit, that's her, etc.
What's her name?
Yes. Alana Ubach.
All right, I'm definitely going to IMDb her.
Anyway, back to your question.
Yeah, I think they're one of the highest art forms out there, and I think that great actors are incredible artists. But it's a weird job because you're pretending to be somebody else.
It is.
Yeah, where does the seriousness come in? Like where it's like not a silly thing.
Okay, there you go. That's a perfect question, and a perfect example was what I was talking about before. When she first got the audition piece about the movie, Bombshell, this is what's cool about answering your question and how interesting it is. It was the first time she was asked to play a character that was a living person.
Yeah.
And had, an entity and an energy, and not only that, but a look and the whole bit. So what's fascinating about it is this was the first time, and like I said, that she's ever been, requested to do such a thing. And so when she was in audition mode, because, I'd say 30 to 40% of the time she still auditions, meaning that the other 60 to 70 is what's called offer only, where they know her work, they just call her and say, I'd like to hire you. So this was a circumstance that she knew the director for, and, he's done countless movies. He's what's Jay's last name? Jay Roach. Sorry. Incredible director. She knew him very well, had worked with him on a couple pieces or whatever. But what I'm saying is what's fascinating about it, and similar to our work, I guess, is that the moment she got it, she hit YouTube and watched this woman constantly for, every breathing moment. She'd wake up, she's watching this woman, her inflections, how she did stuff. And then she got the script and she had to interpret it within the realm of what this woman was, or what this woman is. Because the woman still is on Fox News and blah, blah, blah. She's a staunch Republican and, a big Trump supporter and whatever. So, I may say that this is the complete opposite political view that my wife has, but yet she still had to emulate this person. So there's just one example. And by the way, yes, she got the part, et cetera, and it was amazing to do. And that is one example of the challenges that they face. And then the others are just simply like kind of creating something out of thin air, which is very similar to what we do in production. It's like, creating something out of air. And it's fascinating to watch my wife do it because she is very much an artist in the sense of like with these, what the great artists are, where it's like she looks at something on a page, and trust me, I've been with her now 10 years, and it's fucking awesome because she'll get something and look at it on the page and she'll get an idea in her mind of like what it should be. And it's also cool, by the way, I didn't say this, but a lot of her work is voiceover acting. She does a ton of voiceover acting. She's also an incredible musician. I don't know if you saw the movie Coco. Did you see the Pixar movie Coco?
I did not see Coco.
Okay, you're going to want to see it because it's an absolute masterpiece. And she actually sings in it. She's the only one that sings an entire song. Besides, it's very music-based, by the way. The whole movie is her and the main character, Miguel, sing in the movie. But she's exquisite voice. She's amazing. That's a whole nother, she's a many-trick pony, as they say. I guess back to your question is, that's just what gets her blood pumping. And she never leaves, like, who she is. Like, but I know when she's in a character mode because it will be her focus in a way. I guess much like us, again, if we're like in the middle of like a heated project and it's our focus, and if we're working with not such nice people or maybe somebody that's super creative or whatever it might be. Because your question's really about how much does she bring her work home? And I would say that it's at home a lot, but it's got to be. And that's why I think it's almost a cliche that like two artists are together because I'm in the entertainment business and the arts field, and I understand her when she's working on a new project or doing this or doing that. But the other side of it is she's been doing it long enough to not bring it home too much, and that's a balance because I do hear stories about some of those guys like that are so obsessed with like, they do the, the method acting thing where they are the character for so much. And she was on American Horror Story and she played somebody. She wasn't one of those monsters or something, but she was a victim. She was murdered off pretty quickly. But she's done so many different things that it's fun. It's absolutely so much fun how she gets to do this and this, and especially, dude, the voiceover stuff. Because she's in a brilliant new one now that's on Hulu called Crossing Swords. For this audience, you guys might like it because it's not animation, but it's stop motion animation. It's hysterical. It's super adult, like the dirtiest potty mouth humor, but it's hilarious. It's called Crossing Swords. I recommend it highly. She plays a couple characters, and the main one is the queen. Anyway, yeah, I mean, like, she's very, very fortunate in the sense of that she gets to do all these, interesting, unique, cool, fun things. That's the fun part about it. It's a bitch of a business, just like the music business is. It's a terrible business. Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure.
an absolute. I won't even get into that where it's like, but I need to. I will just say, because we're so off this podcast theme, but
We talk about anything here.
oh, good.
Yeah,
I can tell you that, and it relates to the music business in a sense that she, even an accomplished artist and actress like she is, I mean, she's managed by all the highest, her agent and manager, blah blah blah, William Morris, et cetera, et cetera. However, she was on a production last year that and this happens all the time, where she gets cast for one thing, and they understand her talent and the presence of her talent. And then all of a sudden her character starts to expand and they start writing more and more and more for her. And she just starts doing more scenes and more scenes.
Idea creep.
Yeah, exactly. And then wait, she's only being paid for X, but she's doing X and Y. And then she's doing X and Y and Z. And it's like, wait a minute, hold the phone. We need to get some shit straight. And then it gets pretty stinky. And that stuff happens often. And not to, you can't quell the creative process of the writers and et cetera. But it's the whole point is that, and that one also became a big challenge because she was shooting out of state. And it became, I'll just use the word abusive in the sense of when she was needed and when she was not. And they were calling her at the last minute saying, okay, we're putting you on a plane in 2 hours. And at the time, our son was 2 years old. It's wait, what? Okay, and I'm then in the middle of a record, and it's wait, this is not how it works. Suffice to say, what I'm saying is, as exciting as and fun as the acting business and the entertainment world is, and I may be stating something that everybody knows, but it's a bitch. It can
Absolutely.
Be a very big challenge. It's like any business, and you got to work really hard and stay busy and do all those other crazy things.
I imagine that kind of like in the recording business, when people start adding stuff, at some point you got to hold the line. But at the same time, if you don't go along, there's someone else who will, and that'll get out.
Yeah, you're right. And that's, God bless her. I love the fact that we're using my wife as the example. God bless her, because she has definitely been in that place for a very long time of you know what, I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm going to do what I need to do. And that's why she's worked as long and hard, because she's never been, and trust me, I won't get into all the stories because
you can probably imagine them if you've heard anything about Hollywood ever.
Yeah. And they've happened to her. And she had to make choices where do I blow a whistle and obviously this will be on the news and it'll be a big deal and this person will go, or do I just, grin and bear it and
keep my career?
Yeah, and that's it. And that's what she shows. There's 2 or 3 examples, and I was with her at the time. I'm like, wow. One of them was a long time ago. I wasn't with her when she was a kid actor, and it was a movie that you would know, maybe you didn't see, but yeah, the story was wow, holy shit. Wasn't so good. I mean, she was 14, not a big kid, or not a little kid, but anyway.
Have you ever read The Godfather?
I haven't read it, of course. I've seen it. Yeah.
So remember the horse's head scene, when he tries to get the movie producer to go along?
Yeah.
Well, the book takes that story and goes way deeper into it and goes into how that producer was treating young girls. And one of the reasons that they cut the horse's head off wasn't just because he wasn't going to cast the dude in the part. It was also an ethical thing, because the dude is such a fucking scumbag.
Wow.
The book is pretty nasty.
I love that you're bringing that up, especially in the sense, and I will say this, I'm 100% Italian, and my father, rest his soul, Sicilian, and did not really care for that film, nor did he care for The Sopranos,
Yes.
for the obvious reason. It's a glorification, and how, it's certainly poignant right now to be talking about something that is somewhat racist. Not really racist. I mean, look, he was telling a story about, a poverty-stricken community, and that's what happened in Sicily. But yeah, to your point, there you go. I mean, I like that you're telling me that story because it makes it, I never knew that, and that makes it even cooler because it was like, I'm not happy for the horse, of course. That's heartbreaking, but
it's too bad.
Yes.
So the thing about The Godfather is, what I understand is that it is a glorification for sure, but from what I understand, the writer put it together based on multiple different stories that occurred over a very long period of time. So in The Godfather, it makes it look like it's, one crime family and all this shit happens, but really it's like a bunch of isolated stories kind of congealed into...
Yeah, no question. Yeah, it's a movie, of course. And look, we all understand that the word mafia, yes, it started there. It's present in many different cultures, Japanese, Russian, blah, blah, blah. And it really just means an organized crime group. I've been to Sicily 2 or 3 times, took my father back there. It was fascinating. But, it existed because they were a poverty-stricken country that were colonized through the history. It's a fascinating place because they were colonized by the Moors. They were colonized by the Greeks even before that. And then, of course, the Italians. And it's a fascinating place because you've got a melding of a lot of those cultures in there, especially in the food. The food's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's the best.
Oh, my God. Absolutely unbelievable.
If you live in the U.S. and think you know Italian food, you don't.
Yeah, you don't. You do not. And look, if you go to Italy and you think you're in Rome and Milan and you're eating great Italian food, it's good. But then you fucking go to Palermo and sit down. I will hands down tell you the best meal I've ever had, and I'm not a big pasta guy by any stretch, but I'll never forget it, bow tie pasta in an olive oil with cherry tomatoes. And that's so simple, right? But when you're talking about, obviously organic tomatoes, just picked probably an hour before it was fed to me, handmade pasta, homemade, the olive oil, blah, blah, blah. I'm talking about like, you're like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
The fuck have I been eating? Yeah. What have I been eating for all these years? Or it's just like, that's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually about to say the tomatoes in Italy are an experience. Like you don't have that here.
Nope. No. And I mean, the tomato is the pointer to if produce is good or not, because for some reason, I don't know, I'm sure that, any scientist or biologist be able to tell us that. But, you eat a good tomato and you're like, okay, I'm shopping in the right place, because they're just so... If you're not, it's like eating water. It's red water.
Basically. Okay, so on the topic of holding the line, I want to know where you draw the line or where you've drawn the line in your career. And is it different now than earlier? Like maybe when you were younger, was it more about yes, yes, yes to anything? Like, how does that work for you?
Can I just say, I think it's awesome. We've been talking for like almost 40 minutes and we haven't talked about the business at all yet. I love that.
If this podcast was just about compressors and settings, and
right?
I would have quit. I would have quit a long time ago.
I'm glad you're saying that too, because that's why I had to say when I was talking to Ben and stuff, I was like, please don't make me talk about the attack ratio of a compressor. I mean, I will, but yeah, okay, good. We can at the end. Where do I draw the line in terms of?
In terms of clients who want more than what you agreed on and are unreasonable. It's something that everybody who produces, whether you're working with local bands or working with mega stars, it's part of the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally part of the deal. I mean, you're on revision 50 of a mix. That's just one example. Or even in the beginning, where do you draw the line? Because I've been in so many scenarios where, look, it can get very uncomfortable if you're in the middle of something and you find out you're doing so much more than you need to, because that's specifically sort of what you're saying, right? You gotta be open communication. Luckily, I have a liaison who is my management company who when it gets like a little or even a lot, like, oh, this isn't, I have them step in and say, hey, look. And most of the time, people are pretty cool. I can give you many examples where they're not. And it's, I will never give you names or blah, blah, blah.
No, of course. No, don't. No names.
Yeah, no. There's certain things that have happened in the last couple of years where I will tell you, I'm a bad guy to answer that question. Here's why. I'm the dude that goes way past what is acceptable.
Maybe that means you're the right guy to answer the question.
No, I tend to be just abused. And then it just builds up so much resentment. There was a band I was working with a couple years ago, did a super cool version of a song, and they were managed by a really great, well, before I had them, they weren't managed by this really great company. Then they picked up that manager, which was like, oh, okay, cool. We're going to make an EP, and it's, I'm going to do it for extremely cheap because they're unsigned right now and they don't have a lot of bread. But it's going to be great and super creative. And, I'm going to be working with this management company who's all these great artists. We're going to get a relationship, blah, blah, blah. Did that. Came out amazing. Then all of a sudden, Sony comes knocking on the door, and they love one song. They want to release one song. I'm telling you a long story, but actually it totally applies to your question. They love this one song. They want to release this one song, but here you go. I'm going to say the word. The A&R guy, has, and you all know what I mean, has visions about, how the song could be better or the this or the that. Now, I'm telling you, like, we recorded it, we mixed it, and this was a band that was very much into like 5, 6, 7, 8 revisions of the mixes. Okay, I'm gonna pull up my sleeve and just gonna do it. It's all good, And again, when it's just me and the band, and we're like, I've been doing it so long, I'm streamlining that stuff because I heard a quote a while back, and I bring it to my work. Whatever I'm doing, if I'm writing, if I'm co-writing, whatever, I don't ever do it for myself. Unless I'm fucking Prince, okay? My point being is that I know I'm going to have to do things 2, 3, maybe even 4 times, even if it's full production that don't work. The point is that I'm in a collaborative process, so I know that everybody's going to have an opinion, but suffice to say, I can't be so precious about my work. And trust me, being in the business as long as I've been, I've seen some guys that have been really, really precious about their work, and it just, you shoot yourself in the foot because you just get lost in it. And I'll tell you something, back to my wife, it's a perfect example because she's worked with a countless amount of directors. And she will tell you hands down, the guys that she works best with are the ones that come into the game knowing sort of what they want, because then she's going to bring in something that's kind of what she envisions it, and they get a groove and they go. But she's also worked with a million directors who are like, I don't know, can you try it a little more happy? No, that wasn't it. Can you try it a little more sad? And like, it's 30 takes later, and she's like, okay, you have no fucking idea what you want, really. Because maybe you're inexperienced, or maybe you don't trust your own intuitions or whatever. But it goes back to just, I'm digressing, but I'm not digressing. Because just like any band or any artist we may work with, or any A&R guy or whatever, you got to trust your instinct. The pointer always goes back to cats like the greatest artists in the world and the greatest record guys in the world, like Clive Davis. There's a motherfucker. He trusted himself all the time and knew all those artists that he was about to scoop up and invest his entire life and energy to. He knew it. He trusted himself. So anyway, back to your point about, back to your question, and I've digressed.
Oh, it's cool.
Yeah. But anyway, back to this band. So Sony gets involved, and they're like, what if it could be blah, 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 blah. Well, this is a baby band. This is a young band. And they want to get a single out there pumped by a big major record company. It's the first time they've been approached by this, etc. And so we start going through the hoops. And I'm doing versions that I never imagined we were going to do. Like, this is not a rock band, but they're kind of rock-esque, pop rock band. And it's the song in particular, it's like, it's beautiful, kind of acoustic-y. It's cool, right? So the A&R guy now wants beats. He wants like, the live drum's gone and it's going to be electronic, and, I don't know. He's coming up with these ideas of like hybrid things. Cool. Okay. So now it's gone down a road of like, okay, it's a remix, which is fine. But we've kind of agreed on an amount that I would be paid for my services of doing said version, which became versions, which became versions, like on and on and on and on. And on.
Capital V.
Yeah, capital V. Yes. Goes to them, and it goes to Sony, blah, blah, blah. And then, dude, I still don't even remember how the process went down, but we didn't hear back from the A&R guy, and then et cetera, et cetera. Then all of a sudden, I'm not doing it anymore, and some other producer's doing it who gets paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the icing on the cake, the fucking thing comes out, and it's almost exactly like my first version. Before I swear to God, before we even went down that road. And so, in answer to your question, how far will I go? I'll go to the point of being an idiot, because it got to the point where I was an idiot because I wanted to make the band happy. I'm that guy. Even though I've been doing it for so long, I'm the guy that you want in your trenches because you can. Dare I say the word abuse? Like it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I shouldn't be doing anything more until I get paid. And I had overextended myself, countless amounts of times. And then, the record comes out. I mean, the single comes out, and it's not my name on it. And I saw the release come out, and I listened to it. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah. The question then is it worth it? And I bring that up too because one thing that I always try to tell, listeners or students of URM is that, for instance, if you're going to do something on spec or whatever, or you're going to cut a deal or whatever, anything that you do that's above and beyond has to be worth it in some way. Exactly.
Now, my relationship with the band is still great. I haven't talked to him in a long time or whatever, but eventually we may still work together and blah, blah, blah. It's no hard feelings because at the end of the day, I guess we had the same goal. We wanted the song to get released and wanted it to be well done. And I realized it got lost in the minutia of I don't even remember the record company guy's name or what. But the point is I got no hard feelings towards the band. It was just because I know it wasn't their doing. It's man, I'm going to take this because I eventually was compensated. But yeah, I mean, why did I say yes? And why did I keep doing it? Because it goes down to that thing, man, where it's you want to always do quality of work, of course, but also, I don't know, it's integrity, man. I mean, I guess integrity to the point of, I don't know, ignorance. Because it's
I think that a lot of people who hold the line end up fucking themselves in a weird way. There's different versions of this. For instance, I remember this band who won a contest. They won, a record label was put on a contest, get signed to this record label, and it was actually a pretty big deal. They marketed it like crazy. They had showcases in 20 different cities, and it was this whole big thing. And this is a good label too. And a band won. And then the band didn't like the deal and went public about how they didn't like the deal. And they kind of had that whole mentality of, artists aren't fairly compensated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the end of their career. Obviously it was, it's so stupid.
Yeah, I'm laughing because read the book. Before you even learn a scale in music. I mean, artists are, hello.
There's this fine line where you don't want to ruin your relationships by being that guy that argues about everything, but at the same time, you don't want to be a pushover, and it's a very hard line to walk.
It is. But I find that, I think that's true in every business, but especially ours, and especially now, because it used to be different. Way back when I was first getting going, and this, way back when I started, I was working on a Michael Jackson record. This was way in the beginning of my career. And I remember, first I was a staff guy at the studio and blah, 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 and we could talk about that if you want to. Anyway, I remember that when I was moving up the ranks and I was going to be actually the engineer to be recording Michael's vocals and stuff like that. Bruce Swedien, the legend, et cetera. He pulled me aside and he said, "Now, Thom, I need to tell you something." He said, "You need to be very organized about your billing and the blah and the blah. And this is what every moment, every hour, you're going to be billing Sony and et cetera." Point being is that back then, because it was the world of like no one had a home studio and the this and the that, I think anybody that called themselves a producer per se, it just wasn't. Well, first of all, it also wasn't a career that anybody even thought about that much. I mean, there was just a handful of guys that were doing it because you needed a real studio, et cetera, because technology didn't lend itself to what it is now. But point being is that I just don't think you could be in a circumstance where you were taken advantage of as much as now. And a lot of times it's not even about taking advantage. Like I get approached by artists all the time that just don't have any experience in the business, and they'll sit there and talk to me, and I'll get to talking about them, and blah, 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 blah. And trust me, this is a daily thing. Not daily, but probably a weekly thing where like, we'll talk, and then I'll be like, okay, well, let's talk about the business end of things. If you want me to produce, like sit down and actually invest my entire life, life being like I wake up, I make your music and do, this thing, well, then we have to work something out, compensation-wise or whatever. And because, look, I've done my many, many bands on spec and the blah, blah, and the master I owned and et cetera, and I've shopped them and I've done all that, and I've had, owned their masters and had them synced in, television and film and blah, blah, blah. That's good because there was something that even though I wasn't going to be compensated for it, for the work, I would actually, there was a reason for me to be part of it.
Yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah, of course. It was absolutely worth it to a degree. As I get older, I find that I do that less and less spec stuff. And I think that's true for everybody that's been in the business for a while, because unless something is like, holy fuck, like it's the second coming of, But I also must say that I tend to start leaning towards the philosophy of a lot of like the labels and the this and the that, because it's like, even if somebody does come in, there is the second coming of Jimi Hendrix or whatever it is, like we were talking about earlier about your business before we started the podcast and stuff. It's like, and this is a great topic to expand about if we're going to talk about it. It is one thing to be the most amazing whatever you might be, but it's another thing to be able to, or to have promoted yourself and to present yourself as that person.
Oh, yes.
I hate to even start talking about like the social media thing, but it kind of is, I don't say it's a necessary evil. Do I use that word? But, it just happens. That's culturally what it is. Like it or not, if you are whomever, you better have a presence that, the world has discovered or you force them to discover. Man, that's it. Because we as humans have, we will always have just a limited bandwidth of like, well, first of all, we got 24 hours a day, and now like 23 of it is spent on a phone or glued to something. And so if that's the case, we better find a way that like your talent as a musical artist or a juggler has made its way into my eyes. And whatever that might be. I mean, look, the songs on TikTok are driving Billboard, which is driving radio, which is driving blah, blah, blah. My point is, I think, made by, how did we get on that? How did I digress to that?
I'm with you on this.
Oh, I know what it was. Yeah, I was talking about, like, if somebody presents itself to me, like, doing something on a spec or whatever. Yeah, I mean, and yeah. And that's so necessary for talking to, like, people getting going and the new artists or whatever. Man, you got to have that thing presence, because you could be the greatest.
You want to know what really annoys me?
Tell me.
Okay, so
I want to know all things.
You don't want to know all, trust me. But okay, so this topic comes up a lot with URM subscribers and stuff like, should I do work for free or not? And I say at the beginning of your career, say yes to everything, because you don't have any worth in the market yet. You don't have any worth until the market determines that you have worth. You don't even know what you're good at yet at the beginning. You don't know You just don't know. So they'll watch an interview with some multi-platinum dude who has a bunch of Grammys and has done a bunch of shit, and they'll say, never work for free. I never do anything for free. And they'll point to that guy as the example. And I'm thinking, well, this dude has been on top of the game for like 30 years now. He doesn't remember what it was like at the beginning, obviously. And plus, his struggle era was a different time period. It's not now. So apples and oranges.
Exactly. Very well put. Apples and oranges. Apples and like friggin' kiwis. Yeah. Like apples and like complete. Because I'm going to be that guy. Can I be that guy to say that I am multi-platinum and I've been lucky enough to win some Grammys, and I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say,
yeah, exactly.
I just gave you an example how I worked very hard doing something for free. And you know what? Going back to my wife, if you call my wife and you ask her that question, she has gone on countless interviews, countless podcasts, and I will tell you what her adage has been for her entire fucking career. Say yes, because Whoopi Goldberg told her in a movie years and years ago, say yes to everything. And she has said, and I get chills when I say it because it's made all the difference for her.
Within reason.
To a degree is what we're saying. When it gets to the point of like, you've said within reason. And it's as simple as that. We're all humans here. It's not, if you're dealing with a different species, then this stuff may get out of reason, But we're all humans. And if it's just like, you've said yes and you've worked too hard and, but and back to something I didn't finish before. It's like I still get approached by people who are so new to the business and they're like, I want to collaborate with you, and they'll talk about the this and the that, and it'd be like, okay, well, we should, talk about, compensation. And that's about. It's like, oh, I didn't really know that, that would come. I didn't know that you had to pay for it, and that to me is like that gets to be a respect thing. It's like, well, wait a minute.
What did you think this was?
Yeah, when you walk into a store, and you want to buy those apples, it's like, oh, I just thought, you know what I mean? It's just but if you're sitting down, it's like, oh, we're doing a co-writing session and the this and the that, different story. Because again, it's a different, circumstance where I'm going to own part of a song or part of a master, or the blah, which of course is something I do all the time. Different circumstance, totally. But if this is like a band,
totally different.
So again, pointing back to those people, answer that question. Like, yeah, I disagree. I think you should say yes, and like you're saying, find your strengths. Like because when you haven't done anything and you gotta like not only prove yourself, but like find out what you can do and like to what degree you can do it. It's important.
I mean, did you know going in that Latin music was going to be the shit for you?
No. And it's not, by the way.
Case in point, it's not?
It's a big portion of my work, but the way it happened...
You've crushed at it.
Yes, I have, but it just happened. And I can tell you the story of how it happened, but again, it just happened. It's just music.
That's my point.
Yeah, man, when I started, when I was 20 years old, because I'll go way back in the, in the time ship, that when I was studying at a conservatory, I came from a very, classical background, the whole stuff. I knew I wanted to do something in music. I knew nothing about what I wanted to do. And this is, again, an era, and I'm, dating myself, of course. This is an era where people didn't really talk about, like, because we didn't know about it that much. It was the 80s. So it was like, well, what's a producer do? What's an engineer do? I didn't know anything about that. I knew about being in a rock band and that kind of stuff. And then I walked into a recording studio. This was the era where they were just recording studios. And I was like, with the band that I was recording with in college. And I was like, holy shit, this is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. It's like, wait, this is how Pink Floyd did it. And this is how Steely Dan did it. And, and then I took an amazing recording class in college with this incredible, especially this guy was so cool because a very modern thinker in a conservatory atmosphere, teaching us about recording and, all the shit about, I learned about cardioid versus hypercardioid, blah, 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 all that shit. But again, my brain went, boom. Okay, so now I was like, man, maybe I can do this for a living, because I've had my education. I was a theory major and I studied arranging and the blah and the blah and the blah, but I knew I wasn't going to be, I didn't want to be a rock star. I certainly wasn't going to be in an orchestra like these amazing musicians that were, I was in classes with and stuff, but I was like, wow, this is cool. So then cut to the great fortune I had of like a recording studio. And I was in school in Chicago, by the way. Northwestern University is where I went. There was a new studio opening up in downtown Chicago that a pal of mine, much like me, he was a graduate of my college, and he was a great musician, great arranger, whatever. He was lucky enough to get a job as one of the staff engineers down there. And he's like, look, dude, we need gophers. And I was a junior in college. And I was like, holy shit, how am I going to do this? I went and saw the place and my mind exploded. It was incredible to talk about now, because this was, rooms in Chicago, downtown Chicago. We had a Neve 78 in one room. It had an SSL G series in the other. It was like, oh my God, it's unbelievable.
Craziness.
Like, yeah. Craziness, especially, in the, not only was it Chicago, which is, not a very big musical city, but not like, Los Angeles and New York or whatever. And they had like, 4 rooms or something rolling, and they were brand new and they needed staff. And I was like, holy fuck, I got to make this happen. So, I changed my song totally. And what I did was, of course, started working for free down there as a grunt. And I'm talking, guys, this was like the eras of like, the T-Boy and all that. You hear that stuff. It's like, it was gnarly. I was cleaning the bathrooms and doing the X and the Y and the Z so I could hang out and just watch music being made and mentor under these great, very cool producers that were, it was a big commercial business going on there. So I learned how to move really fast, because those guys would have a deadline from, whatever it was, DDB Needham, where they got to finish a pizza commercial in 2 hours, whatever it might be. And that era was very different from now, because it was like, oh, okay, we got to do this. Cool. Okay, we need a guitarist, a bassist, a drummer, and they worked on a demo. Okay, we got to make this happen. Everybody come in, you record them up really fast and blah, blah, blah. I learned very, very quickly how to work quickly. And again, it was all for free. I was young, 20 years old. And by the way, I was still a full-time student at an incredibly challenging university, Ivy League stuff, and trying to finish my classwork while I was hopping on a frickin' train, getting on the subway and going all the way downtown, I think 2 or 3 days a week. And that went on for part of my junior year and almost my entire senior year, to the point of the day I graduated from college, they were like, all right, you're hired, get down here. So I walked out of college, I was working in a recording studio, and that's not necessarily the specifics of what you're talking about, but it is, in the sense of I worked for free a very long time. Did they take advantage of me? Oh, fuck yeah. I mean, they could have given me $5 an hour or whatever it might be, for the fact that like I was the guy getting lunch and I was the guy like cleaning up the room. But, I never knew anything about mic and a drum kit before I walked in there. But, when I left, I did. I knew about aligning a tape machine, and I knew how to, run a Neve console after that, because, before that, I was just a nobody that thought it was like cool. But I learned, and I got that education for free. So I guess in a way, I just came up with something, dude. I guess what you're saying is like, when you do say yes, you're getting something, even if there's not, you're getting an education.
There's other forms of payment besides money.
Boom. Well put. Very, very well put. Extremely well put. You are learning even if it's not like the technical thing that you're learning about interpersonal communication skills between you and whoever you're working with. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it may be a band that God, I've never worked with anybody that challenging. Or, I've never worked with a hip hop band. Or I've never worked with a trap band, or whatever it might be, or a trap artist, or something like that. It's exactly like you say. There are other forms of payment beside money.
I kind of look at it like different meters. Like there's money, you got experience, you got exposure, and you've got knowledge. And there's some sort of balance of those four with every single gig you take. And there's some where the money side, and this is not just gigs, can be anything, but the money side could be really low, but those other ones could be really high. Like you could be making a relationship that 10 years from now will make your entire career or something like that.
Right.
And so I feel like it's important to take that into consideration. I almost feel like, especially at the beginning, but still thinking about money as the most important part is short-sighted.
It is. And that's true. That's true about everything, because you and I are talking about this, but if you talk about, a hedge fund banker or whatever, they're not, it's a whole different world.
Well, that is the money business.
Yes, exactly. And we're not in the money business, we're in the art business. And it is exactly, at the end of the day, if I've made something that I'm super proud of, and I try to always keep that on my meter. I don't ever want to do something that I'm not, I'm not proud of or don't 100% believe in or 110% believe in. But if I haven't, made the big blah, 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 I can still look back on it and say, wow, because that's just what it is. That's life. And it ain't all about that. It is absolutely not all about that.
I think money's a gauge of the impact you're making. And I feel that way like in business too. Money doesn't just appear, right? It's not just going to magically land in your bank account. Somebody has to agree to give it to you. Like there has to be a reason, right? So yeah, it's like a side effect or byproduct of the impact you're making on the world and on other people. And if you make enough of an impact, the money comes to you because people are willing to give it to you. Like it's not like you can just print that money. I feel like, again, if you're in the hedge fund business, that's one thing.
Right.
But if you're like an entrepreneur or a producer or an artist, whatever, these creative fields, what really matters is whatever impact you're making. If you create something that impacts 10 million people, you're going to make some money.
Yeah.
That's just how it works.
Right.
Whatever the details are of the deal. So that to me is kind of that's at least how I look at it.
Well put, man. And that is a great way to look at it because it is. It's absolutely, and now we're getting philosophical in a sense because it is just byproduct of, it's an unfortunate byproduct often because, culturally speaking, it is certainly our priority. And that's where it's so, directly opposed to what we do, not just,
yes.
Anybody in the arts. It's like it's directly opposed because, it's just funny and it has stuck with me and it'll probably stick with me my entire life. I don't remember where it was, but it was in Rome. It was one of Michelangelo's sculptures. And I remember we were on a tour seeing a bunch of stuff and I remember seeing this one piece. And this was so much into perspective, bro. Because it stuck with me too. I remember looking at it and I was like, that's not great. That's not great. And it was of two women. And it kind of looked like he kind of threw it together. It looked like two dudes that he put like lumps on.
It phoned it in.
Yeah, he phoned it in. And I asked the tour guide and he said, yeah, he was not happy what he was being compensated for this, whatever. I was like, oh, fuck. This is Michelangelo, and he phoned this in. Like, he made the thing and he made it with a girl. Like, it wasn't, beautiful, curvy. It looked like two guys with just lumps on their chest. Like some bad boob job out of Beverly Hills or something. I was like, oh, my God. It's really not good. Like, and after to ever say anything Michelangelo has done is not good is ridiculous. But you see, my point is that, like, it was not, and after you're looking at it for a week on, you really start seeing the nuances. And I was like, wow, this isn't. And again, it pointed back to, like, I don't know. Maybe it was a bad day for him or a bad couple days for him. And he was like, screw it, this gig sucks. And I want to, it's just funny to think about, like, through the course of history. And then, you hear those stories about Mozart too. And it's just like, they got sick of certain shit too because of whatever it is. But they had to deal with this question that we're talking about all the time. It's a question in history of art and commerce and money, being compensated for your work. It's tough. It is a tough thing.
It's tough, but I think it's not natural to put it in a perspective that doesn't get in the way. Like, I think that the natural thing is to just want money. Even people who say they don't, I think they're lying.
Well, yeah, it's a very good point because look, I mean, to feed ourselves and to continue our survival, we live in a world where you need it. You know, even if you're, living in the woods to a degree, you need, you know what I mean? You need food, sustenance, shelter. These are all things that you do need. You need money. So thus it is priority, but it is a balance. It's like, it's back to this whole topic though. It's just like, if you know yourself, and also if you know yourself well enough to say, okay, well, shit, this is something that I got to do for, X amount of dollars, or, B, I'm not going to get anything out of this, ownership wise or whatever. I just want to do it for the integrity of what, this piece will be. Then that's a whole nother thing. So that's knowing yourself.
So speaking of knowing yourself, let's go back to the Latin thing. Do you even listen to that kind of music?
Oh, yes, I do. Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you before it became your thing?
No. And that's what's fascinating about it. Because it's not that I didn't want to or whatever. I just didn't know about it because I fell into the Latin thing, I would say by accident, but a very happy, incredible accident that the way it went down was amazing and joyous and super cool. Now that I look back at it and, it's incredible because it was just fortunate and cool because here's why. B being a guy from the U.S. and, again, born and raised in the Midwest and then came to California or whatever, I know about all those cultures, but I didn't know what the alternative rock scene of Argentina was or what was going down in Peru. And I knew nothing about that. And again, this is pre-internet. So it's not like I could be exposed to it either. It's just, I knew nothing about it. So here I go. I'm, a staff guy at Larrabee. So going back to the Michael Jackson story and working with him, blah, blah, blah. After my Chicago period, I came to Los Angeles. Again, man on a mission, needed to get a job.
What was the mission?
The mission was I want to live in Los Angeles and I want to be in the big leagues.
Okay.
I had lived in Chicago. I was working at that studio. I was being paid. It was a great gig. I was having an amazing time, amazing experiences, working with great...
But you wanted more.
I wanted more. I had my eye on that prize. And I didn't want fame. I didn't want ever. It's just that I was listening to these records again and going, it's New York or LA.
Dude, I get it.
Yeah, I want to be in some kind of the big leagues. And I had my heart also in California. I had been out here and it was California dreaming.
Man, I really, really relate to that. And I think that that's part of knowing yourself. I think that some people don't care about being in the big leagues, and that's fine. But some people are wired that way. I feel that way too. That's actually one of the reasons that, I've had several careers, and what I'm doing now is the biggest thing I've ever done. But the band I was in, for instance, we got signed, we did the whole thing, but there was no way that it could ever get to the big leagues, and it wasn't worth it to me because I'm wired for doing something with a greater impact. And I feel like you got to know yourself.
Yeah, always.
If you know that you need that, then you have to go for it or you're going to be fucking miserable your whole life.
Yeah. It's awesome we were talking about all these things, dude, too, because I got to tell you, these are good lessons for me because, again, I got a 3-year-old. I'm constantly going, okay, remember, I got to teach him that. Remember, I got to teach him that. And that is such a big thing because it's such a cliche and ridiculous to quote Shakespeare, but knowing thyself is like one of the biggest, that's it. If I know that my son gets to be 11 or 12 years old, and I'm bringing it back to what we're talking about in a second, but he gets there and all he wants to be is a landscaper. I shouldn't say all he wants to be. It's fucking awesome, dude. You go out, like Martin Luther King said, and you be the best landscaper you can be, or whatever it is. Whatever it is, you got to know yourself, and whatever it is, you just go for it. And if it doesn't work, then know yourself more and try something else. But yes, exactly like you're saying, you got to. And look, I don't even remember how much I knew myself back then, but I knew it wasn't about, you know, my whole California dreaming thing was not, I didn't want to be famous or whatever. I just wanted to be a part of, to see how those records were really made. Like, you know, how they were really made. Like, I got such a big taste of it. And I mean, look, I was this close to it because I was working on real records in Chicago and all that stuff. But, you know, I don't be like, okay, like, I want to see, like, how, like, you know, and trust me, man, the first week I came to Los Angeles, I learned two things very quick, which was three things maybe, or maybe more. We'll see when I start to expand. But the first thing was, wow, this is different. This is the big leagues. About being in a studio and watching like a top end mixer or producer do their thing, how different it was and how similar it was, but how different it was. That was one. Number two, and this is myself patting myself on the back. Before I came here, I was terrified that I didn't know my shit. And it turned out when I got to Los Angeles that I did know my shit. Which is another great lesson for all you listeners and stuff. It's just like,
well, that's a relief.
Yeah, it was a huge relief. You know, well, because I was like, okay, you know, the story's cute and funny, but you know, again, I was living in Chicago, and I was like, I didn't even tell my family, because we're a very close Italian family. I didn't even tell them that I'm going to fly to Los Angeles for like 3 or 4 days and go on some interviews at studios. I'm going to go, because back then you could do that. You know, I'm passing my resume out. Okay. You know, hi, I'm Thom Russo. I've done this, blah, blah. And I did that. And as luck would have it, you know, I got a call back from 2 studios before I even got back to Chicago about offering me a full-time position as a staff guy. As an assistant and staff. One of them was Larrabee and one of them was Ocean Way. So these are like world fucking class studios.
Yeah.
So I hit the jackpot at the right time, and I literally had to make a decision about where I was going to go. Like, you know, I knew I was moving, and within a week and a half, so I had to, you know, tell my family, and they were very, you know, heartbroken and such. That was one. And number two, I had to, like, you know, drive across the country and then also decide, well, what studio I was going to be at, you know, full time. Okay, so there I am. I'm a staff guy at Larrabee. And this is like, you know, my early mid 20s. Amazing. And if y'all don't know anything about Larrabee Sound Studios, Google it. It should be in the history books of the music business, because there is so much amazing shit that came out of those rooms. And I mean, all the way back to like Hall & Oates, Fleetwood Mac. And there was incredible stuff that was made in those rooms. There were 3 locations at one point, and it went down to 2, and now it's just 1. Still running and still, you know, big and famous and incredible records coming out of there. But the one I spent most of the time at, I'd say 50% of the time at, was one called Larrabee West, which was over on Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood. Then the other one's in North Hollywood, right down the street from where I am now. But anyway, at Larrabee West, I was staff guy, staff engineer. You know, the owner, Kevin Mills, amazing guy. His father had built the studio, actually, built all those rooms. And Kevin and I had a great rapport, and he also knew that he could call me at any time, and I was going to show up and work my ass off and, you know, be the guy as much as I can. Anyway, Prince walked into Larrabee and fell in love with those rooms, so he was just there. He was kicking it, making shit constantly. And the way that guy worked, talk about a work ethic. It was, you know, he'd sit there, book the room out for a month straight, and like, boom, just go. So we were all, myself, and then this another amazing engineer producer who I'm sure you all know, Sylvia Massey, was a staff girl there.
I would love to have her on this podcast at some point.
Dude, yeah, hit her up. She would love it. She is awesome. She's an awesome human. She's obviously an awesome talent, but she's an awesome human. And she's great to talk to. I love her to death. I haven't talked to her forever, but, you know, and that was another thing too. When I was a staff guy there, we were all there. It was magic because Dave Aaron was there, who ended up doing a lot with Snoop Dogg. He's a great talent. It was just our staff team was all like super cool, all the like assistant engineers. And then forget about the engineers and mixers we were working with, Dave Way, Alan Meyerson, you know, and the producers and blah, blah, blah. I mean, they were all like mixer producers type stuff. And then the artists. Okay, boom. So anyway, back to making this long story even longer. There's a reason for it. So I ended up working on some of the Prince sessions. And I was working under Keith Cohen, another amazing mixer. And in the late 80s, early 90s, Keith, everything he touched turned to gold. He was mixing everybody's record constantly and producing and such. But Keith was untouchable. Prince loved Keith's sound. And I was starting to work under Keith a lot. There were 2 records that Prince was kind of making at the same time. I ended up doing a lot of shit on. That was Diamonds and Pearls, great record, and the first Batman soundtrack, if you remember it. And I'm talking Michael Keaton era.
The Danny Elfman one?
Danny Elfman, I think, did the score.
Oh, okay. So not the score soundtrack. You mean the Prince soundtrack?
The Prince, exactly.
Okay.
Prince
yes.
soundtrack. Yeah, the Bat Dance, all that shit. Like, it was
Fuck
awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. So I was part of that. Now, the way that lent itself to, my Latin world was this. So there was a band that came to town from Buenos Aires, Argentina. This band was signed to Universal down there. They were a big deal down there. What year would this have been? Early 90s, maybe? Early to mid 90s. They were called Ilya Kyriaki and the Valderramas. Okay. I knew.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
How the hell do you spell that?
Right, exactly. Ilya Kyriaki's a very famous soccer player. No, Valderramas is the soccer player. I don't remember where the name derivation comes from, but it's beside the point. Anyway, these guys were in town talking to people, talking to producer, engineers, blah, 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 because they wanted to collaborate with somebody in the U.S., somebody in, Los Angeles, hopefully. So they had heard that I had worked on, this was a couple of years after the Prince stuff, and they had heard that I had worked with Prince, blah, 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 heard the records. They were like, wow, we want to meet this guy. So I went to lunch with them, and we met, and they gave me this CD of what they had done. They'd done, I think, a record or 2 before that, and it was insane. It was so fucking cool because these guys were doing, talk about forward thinking. They were doing hip hop meets jazz, meets, R&B, meets everything. I mean, they had influences from Steely Dan to Prince. Like, some of their shit was super deep funk. By the way, an all live band and 2 front guys that were rapping and singing. So I was like, what? Oh my God. I heard it and I was like, this shit's incredible. It's so forward thinking. Like, it's probably the most forward thinking. And here I am in the U.S. thinking like, rah, 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 and all this shit. Like, because this is the era of Dre is happening now and blah, blah. I'm like, wait a minute, check this shit out. This is coming from Argentina. And they were a big deal down there. And of course, I knew nothing about this, as did most people not knowing it. And even if you were Latin, I don't know if you'd have to be really, on the edge to know, something about, this super cool band in Argentina. So I ended up doing a record with them, and we did the first one here because this is what was also amazing about it. Here's this band from Argentina, you signed to Universal, whatever. So we're cutting everything live. It's the whole band's live, bass, drums, guitars, the whole bit. The arrangements are blowing my mind because they're a 6-piece band with 2 guys in the front that are pretty much rapping and stuff. Then 3 or 4 of the songs, it's full orchestra. I'm talking 50-piece orchestra is on these tracks. I'm like, this is blowing my mind. I'm like, this is the coolest fucking... And here I am, like, I just stumbled on it, and I'm a part of this. And this is so fucking cool. And I was working at, we recorded almost all of it at Ocean Studios, Burbank, which sadly now is deceased. That was an amazing room. Absolutely, like, one of my favorite rooms in the world. I would say it was like this ridiculous.
Yeah, it's legendary.
Legendary. 80, 78 for days. It was a huge, I made 1 million records there post this place. I didn't even know about this place. They had heard about it because the production coordinator said, oh, maybe we should go and work at this place. And I went and looked, I was like, oh, wait, I'm making this super cool music with this band from Argentina and we're recording here. And I was like, sign me the fuck up. And so there we go. The first record in the Latin industry that I'm doing. And it's super cool. And I couldn't be happier, and we're making great stuff. So the way this springboarded into all these other projects I ended up doing was the band knew a guy very well by the name of Gustavo Santaolalla. Now, Gustavo is an incredible talent, amazing musician of his own right. He's Argentine, had been in the U.S. for a while, was given a boutique label on Universal. Because the thing about Argentina that I came to learn was that, like, their kind of alternative rock and rock en Espanol was the scene that he was on the forefront of or whatever. And, you know, he was given this label that was, again, a subsidiary of Universal to sign all these cool acts and to do all these cool things. Because, again, he was a producer in Argentina for a long time and came here and was doing a bunch of stuff. Now, this guy is, again, if you Google him, you'll be like, holy crap. Was a producer in his own right for all these legendary, super cool Latinx and alternative Latinx. And then he turned around to become a big film score guy now. Not even now. He's been doing that for a long time. And that's, you know, like 90% of what he does now, or 100%. He's incredible. And he turned around and won 3 Oscars for all like Motorcycle Diaries and Babel and like these incredible movies. Anyway, back to my story. Gustavo knew the guys in the band of Ilya Kuryaki very well. And he happened to just come to the studio when we were mixing. We were at the mixing stage. We were mixing at Larrabee. That's it. I remember now. We cut everything at Ocean and mixing at Larrabee. So we down there. Gustavo came in the room and was hanging out with the guys, saying hi, blah, blah, blah. And he heard what I was doing. And he was like, holy shit, this sounds great. And he's like, you know, and we had a rapport. We got to chatting, and he's like, maybe we should do something together. I was like, absolutely, dude. Let's, you know, whatever. I was like, sign me up. This scene is super cool. And so then, like, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, he called me, and he's like, hey, I got this new guy that we just signed, a new artist. He's been, you know, had a band in Colombia for a long time, and now he's doing this solo thing. His name's Juanes. Okay. Now, I put the big, you know, thing around that because Juanes is now, you know, international superstar, one of the biggest Latin acts of all time. And Gustavo called me, and I went over to his studio, and I listened to some of his demos, and I was like, fuck, once again, sign me up. Now, this time, the budget was pretty low because he was a new artist. We didn't know where we were going, but Juanes had a vision, and he and Gustavo had a vision, and it was super cool. And I just, I came in as this time I was just an engineer mixer, but, I heard the demos and I heard what this was going to be about. I was like, sign me up once again. And there you go. That was one springboard led to another springboard, led to another springboard, and then kaboom.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
That is exactly why I tell people to not pigeonhole themselves when they're starting, because there could be a genre that you don't even know exists where somehow you just click with it and do great work. Something you said earlier, I want to ask you about that. Like, you said that when you went to LA, you realized that you kind of knew what you were doing, but that's a pretty big scenario to walk into, suddenly working with people like Prince. And did you have any imposter syndrome? Just because most successful people I talk to have dealt with imposter syndrome at some point. Like,
I don't know what imposter syndrome is. Does that mean like I'm there and I'm thinking like, oh my God, I'm an imposter?
It's this feeling of, I'm here and they're going to figure out I'm a fraud.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're going to figure out I actually don't know.
You know what? It's hard for me to remember specifically, but I remember being nervous. Nervous in the sense of, I got to tell you, it's so funny, man. I saw Alan, I don't know if you guys know who Alan Meyerson is. Do you know who Alan Meyerson is?
I do not.
Okay, he's a legendary mixer. Now, he's gone into the film thing and does all the big film mixes for Hans Zimmer or whatever. Well, back when I was just starting, Alan was he's in the music business as a producer, mixer, blah, blah, blah. I tell you this because Alan was the first guy. I'll never forget it. I walked into that room at Larrabee, and it was Studio B, Larrabee Studios, and I get emotional when I start thinking about that room because that was a special place. Like, it's like, for me, and it's not just for me, I mean, for many people in the music business, hip hop, metal, pop, whatever, like that space should have been a historical monument. They should have left it up and just like charged tickets for people to walk through and said, this is where X and Y and Z and blah, blah was recorded. And, you know, Kevin Mills, great guy. He was smart. He's a businessman. He sold the space and, you know, it became a bar and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, my point is that I walked into that room when I was that age or whatever, and I'll never forget it. I was going to be the assistant under Alan Meyerson. And so on to your question about imposter syndrome, I mean, I was nervous as hell because I was like, God, I don't think I'm ready for this, you know, but I never freaked out because I guess I had enough experience into accepting the fact that I might not know everything and I needed to be a good student and to shut the fuck up when I needed to shut up or whatever. Pretty much always shut up. Don't say a word. Just do anything you were told. Because I'll never forget, Allison was like a master craftsman with mixing. And it's just incredible. Again, go look at his discography. It'll blow your mind. But the way, and this was the analog years, of course, the way his patch bay looked, I will never forget it. Because, you know, you'd have 12 reverbs and, 13 delays all set up doing different shit or whatever. And the way an analog patch bay looked, I mean, you know, I got a big one here, but it was insane. And I remember, you know, and that was, in a mix room, that was the assistant's job to make sure that was well documented and this and that, because it's so different from the world now. I mean, now you save your session and then you just open it back up and it's all there. Well, try doing that in the analog world where every fucking piece of gear not only needs to be recorded in the chain that it went, but the settings and this. And this is also before the era of like cell phone photos and all that bullshit. Like you wrote the shit down. It had to be written down correctly. So back to my story about Alan, like he whipped me into shape in the sense of like, we just had a vibe in the sense of like, he knew that I knew enough of my shit about signal flow and like the console and the blah, but that I still needed to know the X and the Y and Z of like what needed to be done in my job. So back to your question, I think I'll pat myself on the back again. I think I had a perfect balance between, I was never cocky ever because I think I didn't realize that, I do know my shit until way after the fact. Like I was confident enough to say, okay, I know enough and I'm going to do really good work. But it was never to the point of like being cocky. And because there were those guys that were kind of like, you know, poking around in the rooms and whatever, that were a little bit like, oh yeah, and I wasn't. And I think that also made me more excited about like working really hard and like, I'll do that session. Sure. I know it starts at 2 a.m., whatever. I'm there. I'm going to learn something from it. I'm going to learn something about something. And I've never worked with that guy and I want to learn, you know, I want to learn from him and see how he does something. Because, again, this was the era of, like, just legendary guys. Like Alan, of course, Dave Way, who that's a name I'm sure you know, or most people that are listening know. I mean, Dave, he's still a dear, dear friend of mine. And the shit that I learned under him, incredible. Had a totally different way of working than all these other guys, etc. But you know, to answer your question specifically, man, I don't know. It would make sense that I would have had that imposter thing, but I think it was more just about like nerves of being like, nerves. Yeah. Oh God. Like,
well, I think it's related though. I do think that imposter syndrome is kind of like a form of social anxiety. Yeah. Which is nerves. I think it's related.
Yeah. It sounds like it's very related. And sometimes it's healthy too. I mean, I remember being, this is a funny story. I remember being very nervous because working on a track, I think it was Diamonds and Pearls at this time. And this is what always would happen with Prince. We called him the P-Man. Like, you'd never know. Imagine a room. It's about, I don't know, maybe this is the rooms at Larrabee, like maybe 20 by, I don't know the exact dimensions. But my point is, these are small mixed rooms. And you'd never know when he was coming in. And he was like Batman because we'd be working on the track for countless hours, just at the console like this. All of a sudden you'd turn around and there he'd be. Like he'd just be standing there. Just like you'd be like, oh fuck, that's Prince. And then he'd be like just grooving or whatever. Then he'd come over and sit at the console. So I remember one day, and this again relates back to what we're talking about nerves. Remember one day he's grooving and then all of a sudden he stands up and he looks around and he picks up his guitar, which is in the corner. and he's playing a part. He's like, I want to put this in the chorus. And I realized, fuck, I didn't have a DI line set up. And I got this ginormous mix with every piece of equipment in the room, like plugged in or whatever. First of all, I don't even know if there's a track, because this, again, back in the analog era where everything's filled up and you better make sure that things were documented well, because what if I'm putting it on track 13 and that's actually a background vocal that happens in the second chorus? I don't know about it and I'm going to fucking erase it. Then what? Then it's my ass. Talk about needing experience, because I hate to say it. I don't hate to say it. I'm not digressing here. It's easy now because you got that thing called undo, or you can see it. Well, imagine making music with not being able to see. Imagine that.
I think that the modern generation of engineers cannot imagine that.
Yeah, it's engineers. There's a drum tech I work with all the time that calls
engineers. Holy shit, I've never heard that before. That's great.
He calls it engineers, and it's true. And look, I've acclimated. I have to do it, but I haven't thought about it in a long time. But here we are talking about it, and I remember that. I remember working with Puffy once. This was in the beginning of his career, and like the track came in. The track sheet that I was like, oh my God, the track sheet was terribly labeled. I didn't know where anything was, and I had nothing to do with that. I was just, it was a vocal session, and I had to run the kind of show, and I was like, okay, what do I do? Because this track sheet's a fucking joke. Like, so imagine the only eyes you have on this piece of tape is like something that somebody else wrote, and they did a shitty job of it. Then what are you going to do? Because it's your ass if you roll over something that is obvious.
I guess the modern equivalent would be, okay, so there was this session once where it's like 300 tracks came in, not consolidated to zero, and all kinds of like audio 1, audio 42, audio 89, but not just that. A lot of them were somehow the timeline just got screwed up. So they were not even in time. So it required, first of all, you don't know what role these play in anything. I mean, some things are obvious. Like some things are obvious. So you know what the snare is. But like when a 300 track production that has all kinds of synths and pads and like strings and guitars and like room mics, like guitar room mics and like all that shit. And they're not in the right place, and they're not labeled.
Oh my God!
I think that's the modern equivalent. I think
it is the modern equivalent. Yeah, of course. It's like absolutely. I mean, modern equivalent. I mean, comes down to something as simple as labeling, track labeling. Yes, but imagine if you just can look at the track label and not.
If you could. Yeah. You couldn't even see it.
Yeah, you couldn't see it. I mean, if you couldn't see it, it's like, fuck. You actually have to listen. And then you listen, but how do you know, unless someone's sitting there talking to you about it, what role it plays, especially if you're not the producer or whatever. You don't know what role something, could play. So anyway, back to this Prince story. Why were we talking about the Prince story? I don't remember. Oh, being nervous.
Being nervous, yeah.
Yeah, imposters. Anyway, it was just very funny because I remember how nervous I was because there he was sitting playing this part, and he was in a really good mood this night. And I was just scrambling to fucking grab a DI, plug it in, there's got to be an open preamp here somewhere. And there's got to be an open track. And I'm looking at the track sheet and going, and I'm just freaking out. And he goes, man, he said, you better figure this out before I forget this part. I'll never forget it. It was the funniest thing. And I said, bro, I'm working on it. And eventually, very quickly, I found, something, a place to put it and to record it. And it ended up great. And he was Prince playing a rhythm part that ended up on the record. It was incredible. But hot seat, just nerves of freaking, just freak out oh my God. Because you got to be ready for everything. I guess the moral of the story is A, you got to be ready for anything. And B, when you're in the hot seat, you got to sweat, but make it happen. It's like landing an airplane in I don't know, in a big storm.
Extreme crosswinds with an engine out.
Yeah.
I've always said that being a great engineer, and I mean, this means producer, mixer, whatever, all that, it means being a great problem solver.
You have to be.
Again, I keep referring back to the student base at URM, but this is crucial because they're listening. And something that comes up a lot is, so are you familiar at all with Nail the Mix? our program now, The Mix?
Yes.
Okay, so you know that we provide tracks from actual sessions.
Oh, cool.
Yes, every single month they get exactly what the mixer got, basically.
Yeah, cool.
We license it from labels, and it's the real thing. And as you know, there are no perfect sessions, no matter how high budget or no matter who's working on it. There's always some fuck up somewhere, something. Maybe there's a bad edit. Who knows? Like, there's always going to be something.
Yeah.
A lot of the beginners who are only used to programming MIDI with drums, using a superior drummer and recording some DIs and all that, they're not used to that. So they think that we're providing them subpar tracks or something like that, or that we didn't quality control them. And it's like, actually, we're giving you exactly what the mixer got, and you've heard the final result, which sounds incredible, which means this person solved that problem.
Exactly.
So you got to learn how to solve that problem, because there are no perfect sessions. And if you can't do that, you're doomed, straight up.
Yeah, dude. That is, you're in whatever it is. I mean, those guys like, the legendary dudes that were in the studios making records with the legendary bands. I don't, Pink Floyd, whatever it was. Trust me, they had problems,
of course,
to solve on a whole different level. And many times it was like, how do I get the band all in the room at the same time? You talk about a problem? Here's a problem. Try to make Rumors, okay? Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Try to make Rumors with not only the drugs, not to whatever, but how about the fact that you got two couples as the band, I mean, come on,
What an insane story that band is.
An incredible story. And then you hit play or you drop the needle on that shit and you're like, you don't ever talk about the problem solving. And there you go. It goes back to how we started our cast here. I mean, like in the movie business, that's all it is problem solving. Because trust me, man, I mean, God, they're shooting outside and it's pouring rain or whatever it is. Like,
you want to know how long it took for me to set up this shot that you're looking at right now?
Tell me.
This took a lot. Like, it took a few weeks I'm not the camera guy at URM. We have someone who's way better. But from my limited experience with shooting things, like, it's so fucking hard to get something to not look god awful. To do things on the level of a movie, like, say, like the most simple movie or like a Chris Nolan movie.
There you go. Yeah.
It's so beyond ridiculous.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the kinds of problems that they're solving. It's beyond me.
Yeah. And in a group, and that's what makes the really good, problem solving is, and it's cool to talk about in our line of work because we can talk about the specifics about, trust me, man. I mean, you might get those nail the mix things. I mean, there you go. I'm sure sometimes, because it's happened to me before where I get handed just a pile of like audio 1s, audio 2s, audio 3s. And the first thing I'll be like, are you fucking kidding me? And then you'd be like,
well, what's the second thing you do?
Yeah, you solo it up and hit play. And you just, listen. And you start to, and hope to God, whoever you're working with, band, label, whatever, are communicative enough to say, all right, tell me not only what you're looking for in the broad sense of stuff, but like, do we need to get down to what everything is? Because look, anybody that's going to do that, especially nowadays, where it should be somewhat obvious that you need to correctly label things. I mean,
you would think it's obvious, but I can tell you, so we have these courses, and the very first one that you have to take is mix prep.
Great.
Because I know they'll skip to like parallel compression, everything's sexy.
Oh, God.
And they won't do mix prep. And like, so many people don't label things right.
Oh, yeah.
Man, if you don't, I feel like if you don't have that stuff down, you're asking for so many problems. You're setting yourself up. Yeah,
you really, and you know what? And bro, it points back to just personal skills. And you can ask my wife, I mean, especially in our line of work, the most important thing to be is organized. And the reason why I say ask my wife, because she thinks I'm crazy because I'm hyper organized, but I don't know. But in our line of work, if you don't know what this one tiny thing is and you're going to present it to somebody else, you better make sure you can communicate it enough via a label that they will understand what it is. You know, I mean, much of my work, dude, is I'm like, nowadays especially, it's like a producer, engineer, mixer. I do it all in my box, okay, or in my world. But even though I've been doing it for so long, if you see the labels on my tracks, you'll be like, oh, okay. It's just because I've been so organized enough, and I'm so glad to hear that that is one of the first classes, because it's a life skill about, I don't know how, I mean, being organized, tell me the negative impact of being organized. I don't understand. And you like, just go to your computer. If you're looking through your system folder, if that's not organized, your computer's not going to run. So, etc. On your phone, it's just like, if stuff is not organized, if a car engine is not organized, it's not going to fucking run. Ask a pilot who's flying the plane if he's not organized about like his checklist. It's not going to fly. Oh, and he's going to kill, the hundreds of people that are on a plane. It's like there's nothing negative to being hyper organized. I just don't. I see it as just such an attribute, like, and it brings like happiness and positivity to everybody. Because it's such a like, all right, that's
absolutely
done. Yeah, that's done. Let's do all the rest of the stuff now, because it's the primary.
I think the thing with organization is, on top of not making your life chaos and the life of people you work with chaos, it also frees up your brain RAM. I mean, you only have so much RAM in your head, and also so much time.
Big time.
In the day. And if you're using that time and RAM trying to find things, not knowing where they are, you're wasting your life.
I cannot agree more. I mean, again, it comes down to the basic things. And I always, now in my life, my pointer is always my 2-year-old son. And I'm teaching him about these things where stuff needs to go, which is very relative to what we're talking about. Because look, if the scissors go in this drawer, and that's where they always are, the million times you need those scissors, you're going to know where they are, and you don't have to use brain RAM on like spending time. Oh, fuck, where is that? And it's time, and it's brain, and it's stress. You're like, because God knows you're going to probably have to be doing something else or blah, blah, blah. So it's like, why don't I just go to where the scissors are supposed to be? And, which is exactly what we're talking about. It's just, primary.
See, the thing is, if someone is thinking, oh, it's not a big deal, it's just the scissors, that's not the point, because typically it becomes a chronic thing. It's not just the scissors. It's lots of things. And so if you factor looking for the scissors and then looking for your wallet and then looking for your keys and then trying to find some bills and then where's that item of clothing, and then the amount of time it starts taking up, multiplied over days, over weeks, over years, like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's a fucking year. Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. And it literally, so that 5 seconds it takes you to label the thing as hi-hat or electric guitar 2 rhythm, like, is just gonna, like, in a month or even in the next day. Seriously. I mean, I don't understand these people. Like, if it's called audio, it's like, how do you fucking know? Like, really, how do you know?
It's like, of course it's audio. Like,
it better be.
Yeah, it's like we already know it's audio.
Yeah. So it's just, it doesn't make any sense. Because think about that. Again, the time it takes you to label it is exponentially multiplied, because the next day you need to find it. You're going to not know what the fuck it is because it's not even named. You know what I mean? It's just, what's the point? Unless it's some kind of weird exercise you want to do, where it's like, I don't know. But we're saying the same thing.
An exercise in ruining your life, basically.
Exactly.
All right, so you said you wanted to get in the big leagues, not necessarily get famous or whatever, but you wanted to be working with that top tier, doing the real shit.
Yeah.
Did you see Grammys coming up? Was that on the list of, like, bucket list?
It's funny. I didn't.
Because you've got a lot of them. Lots of people have, like, one.
Yeah. It was definitely not on my bucket list. Although, if you talk to one of my old girlfriends, she told me many years ago, and we're still close. This is my girlfriend when I was in my 20s. right when I moved here and stuff. She said it was so on my prize in the sense of like, I didn't want to be famous. I was like, man, I want to win a Grammy someday. She said that I would say that a lot, and I don't remember it. I don't, because maybe I said it, and then once I got into making records, like all I was thinking about was how fun it is and how cool it was. And again, it wasn't about, I want to be famous and I want to do platinum records and I want to be like that guy. It was just about learning and, making cool shit and being a part of the cool shit. And, and that was it. Like, I feel like having your eye on the prize of an award, like, what is that? Like, I don't know. I'm being really honest about this. It's just like, I don't know what that is. And I can tell you that I'm not taking him for granted by any means. But, and maybe I'll get emotional when I say this too, it's like, I don't even really look at him much. And when I do look at him, I really look at the year or whatever, and I really look at what the award was for. But I look at the name and the project, and I think back to the cool memories of what it was like to be in there to make it.
Yeah.
That's where the value is. That's where the deep beauty and the value is. Like, and I guess that would be like just me scrolling through my discography and like, oh, that project was so like, blah, blah, blah. But that's to me where, and it's awesome to be acknowledged by the Academy and your peers and this, and for someone to say, wow, that was such a cool record, and know that it was recognized. But I know I sound like a cliche, but it's not. It doesn't matter.
I don't think it's a cliche, and I can tell you that I don't have any Grammys, but I've gotten quite a few plaques for different things, and the company just received some plaques for some milestones we achieved, and
awesome.
I didn't give two shits. I didn't even go to, like, my partners went to the ceremony and I didn't even go because I'm like, whatever.
Right.
Because I didn't really care. But then at the same time, there's a part of me that's like, well, it still represents what went into it. It represents a time period of going all out, and then the result of going all out.
Yes.
And that's the part that's cool. The actual getting the award and all that stuff is like, whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't think it sounds like a cliche.
Yeah, no, you're saying the same. And there you go. I don't hate to, but I mean, Ford versus Ferrari is exactly that. That was Christian Bale. It was so not about, he wanted to win, but that wasn't the motive. Like, it was.
It's the byproduct.
Yeah, it's just a byproduct. I mean, that's the cool little icing on the cake. But, we all want the cake. And the cake is like making good shit that you believe in and is cool. And like, I don't know. The older I get, the more I see that and I look back at it and think like, man, not that it doesn't matter, but yeah.
It matters probably differently than before it happened.
Yes.
It's interesting you said that about your old girlfriend, just because I have a girlfriend that I got with when I was like 18 through 22, and we're like 20-something years later, we're really good friends.
That's awesome.
She's gone on to become like a successful artist, and we've kind of had like parallel careers. Like, and she always said she wanted to be a successful, fine artist, and so it's cool.
Awesome.
She's like in museums and
wow.
all that shit.
Oh my God.
Like for real.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, so we're like family. But she told me that when I was 18, I kept saying, I want to build an empire.
Wow.
But then I didn't think about that, because then I started playing and pursuing my band and then production. And somehow it all turned around and went into having a few companies that do this education stuff that is starting to slowly, I guess, become that. And it's just interesting that it's not about that word, but at the same time, that's where my head was. Kind of like you were saying, you want to get a Grammy back then when you're really, really young. I guess there's this like purity of vision. You got to keep your eye on the prize, but at the same time, you can't be distracted by the prize.
Right.
If that makes sense. Like, you know how some people, like, they worry about Grammys and they worry about the money too much. They're not worried about the stuff that actually gets you there, which is like making the impact, helping the artist become the best version of themselves, connecting with their audience, like being a great person to work with, like all that stuff, which is the journey, which is much more important. I think where people make a mistake is they focus on the result and not the journey. And the issue with that is that the result, that prize, is like, maybe it's like a fleeting moment. It's like, you get the prize and then it's over.
And then what?
That's that.
Yeah.
And so and then what? And so if that's all you're focused on, well, what were you doing the other 10, 20 years? Like, were you hating it on the way to that? So that's why that cliche about enjoy the journey, I didn't used to understand it when I was younger, but the older I get, the more I get it, because if you're just going purely on math, purely practically just on amount of time spent on things, the amount of time you spent receiving an accolade or something is tiny, tiny, tiny compared to the amount of time you spend on everything else. So if you're not digging everything else, what are you doing? Are you really doing it for that one night?
Yes, exactly. Or
it seems like a waste.
Yeah, or 2 minutes that you're gonna maybe go on a stage and receive the award or whatever. Yeah, it's just like a, oh God, that feels great moment. But if you don't, that's a perfect way to put it, man. Yeah, it's like if that is your motivational factor, and again, this is beautiful. We're talking about this because it has. Of course, it has to do with the music business, but it's in anything in the arts, but also anything that's like, creative in a sense. If your motive is like just that, then like maybe it's time to just reassess,
and not because there's anything wrong with wanting that. Reassess because if you're not really loving what you're doing, you're not going to work as hard as the people who do love it.
Right.
And you're not going to get that award anyways.
Right.
Like, from talking to you, I can tell that you're obsessed with this stuff. And it sounds like you've always been obsessed. And I think that in order to do great things, you have to do something that you're obsessed with, because the amount of time it takes and effort it takes it's unreasonable. So the only way you'll do it is to be obsessed.
Well put. Yes, you gotta be unreasonable in the sense. That's true for, again, every line of work. I have a good buddy that's a surgeon. Very interesting that we became pals. And it's awesome to talk to him because he is in a totally different world than I am. You got to be obsessed. And there you go. This is an incredible analogy. And I've never talked on a podcast about this. But it's interesting when we hang out because I ended up meeting this guy because he's a surgeon that's taking amazing care of my mother because she had some health things go on, and God bless her, she's doing great now. But
glad to hear.
Yeah, he's worked on her 2 or 3 times. Anyway, we got to be pals, and it's fascinating because every time we sit down and have a beer, he's interested in talking to me about like what my life is like, or what my wife's life is like what goes into a day of, and then. And then I want to sit there and I tell him, of course, and I laugh. I'm like, oh, dude, come on. We're not like saving lives like you. So point being is that like, here you go. You talk to a guy like this and it's like his priority. It's certainly not money per se, but it's also, it kind of goes without saying, I guess, that he's saving the life, but literally, this is what this guy does every time he gets that call to go into the emergency room. It's like, okay, what's the problem? And I fix it. But trust me, he's not doing it for like, I don't know. Some of those guys, I guess, do it for the fame or the blah, 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 blah. But he's a scientist and a doctor, and this is what they do. So I guess what I'm saying is that like his motivational factor isn't certainly some award or even the fact that like I saved a life. Good for me, because that's ego based. And God, I mean, pointing back to that, it's just like if you are in that place where that's your motivation, where to the award or the money or the blah, blah, blah. Well, isn't that all ego based?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need some ego though.
You got to have ego. Of course you got to have ego.
Yeah.
It's healthy.
Just got to keep it in check.
You got to keep it in check. As a human, it's very healthy. And, back to my toddler son, where they're all running on ego. My wife and I were talking, interestingly enough, about, we have a friend of ours who supposedly checked his children too much about their ego. He tried to take the word me out of their vocabulary. Yeah. And it tweaked them.
Interesting.
Yeah, it tweaked them because now they're a little older and there's issues. But because look, I mean, my son is it's about him and what he wants and the blah, blah, blah. So you've got to apply the discipline of what, but again, the ego is very important in those early years and that early period of like forming like the self, because you've got to have it. But when it comes to just being egotistical in this place that we're talking about, man, it's like that can't be the motivational factor, or then you become the guy who's running our country. There, I said it.
Hopefully not longer. I was just reading a couple books on narcissism.
Oh my God. Wow.
Just because it's a topic that fascinates me because it's interesting. Like, I'm trying to figure out for myself, like, how far down that spectrum I am, and also people I work with. And it's just, I like to understand people. And one thing, what I learned about narcissism, and I think this directly relates to ego, is that it's on a spectrum, like,
oh yeah,
lots of other things to do with the brain. And there's one end of it that's pathological and a complete mental illness that's almost untreatable. So that would be like a 10. But then on the other end, which is when someone doesn't have enough of one, they don't have any confidence in themselves. They're complete pushovers. They don't have enough confidence to take an opportunity.
Wow.
So you need to have the right amount to be able to say, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to do it. If you don't have that much ego, you're going to have a very, very hard life, and you're going to get run over by people all the time.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. So there's a healthy amount.
Yeah. Dude, is our podcast about psychology and parenting and socialization? Or is it... I'm just saying, we've hit some great topics in this talk. Like, really, really good. Really good. You couldn't be more right about that. You couldn't be. It's just like that. Those are like interpersonal communication skills and interpersonal skills that are so freaking necessary. You've got to have just the right amount. Because if it's too much, it's just like it's too much salt in the soup. And if not, it's just too bland.
Yeah, exactly. It does you no favors. And on the topic of the podcast, like I said, we were just talking about attack ratios and all that stuff.
Yeah, I meant that as the biggest compliment because this is awesome.
I do this because honestly, I get really, really bored by a lot of audio and music podcasts because I feel like, first of all, I don't feel like podcasting is the best medium for teaching. So if you want to learn how to compress something, either you do it in person from a mentor, or there's a lot of great videos online where you can listen to things, watch the moves, have them explain. But a podcast, I don't think it's the place for that.
I agree.
But
I agree.
That said, so speaking of egos and egotistical people, narcissists, artists, they don't necessarily always go all the way, obviously, because sometimes if they go all the way, they can't have relationships with people that are strong enough to propel their career because they alienate everybody. But I think to be a superstar, you have to have some enhanced degree of narcissism. So that said, how have you dealt with that? Or is there something that you've learned around these superstars of how they keep it in check enough to get the job done?
Yeah. And by the way, before I forget, you got to tell me what those books are on the narcissism because I'd love to read them. But in answer to your question, yes. I think, luckily, and I have said this before, my exposure to the ones that have a level of unhealthy ego has not been too much.
I'm not surprised because I think that in order to get to the top, you have to be to be able to communicate with people.
You got to be able to communicate with people and have humility and have an understanding. And like a perfect example, man, I got to have so many examples, but like, you remember Adele on the Grammys a couple years ago? They were doing the George Michael thing and she started it and she had a full fucking orchestra on stage with her. And it was live TV and she stopped the orchestra and she stopped live TV. You know why? It wasn't ego. It was, she hit a couple bad notes and she literally said to the audience, I owe this to him and what this is about. Oh, yeah,
I remember that.
And it was,
that's right.
I get chills just saying because it was such a humbling, beautiful, from that voice, a voice of an angel. And so I guess what I'm saying is that like So an artist like that who should have the biggest ego and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I think when artists get to that level, it's the ones that aren't at that level or whatever, where, like you said, they've got to have a certain amount of ego to get to, from nothing to that place. But it really is about believing in your art and believing in your, what you got, and it's cool, and knowing that, but believing in your art, yeah, it's on the same page of ego, but it's not like when you get to that, like, whatever that thing ego is, it's just like, it's ridiculous in a way. It becomes ridiculous. And yes, you're 100% right that when you're dealing with the superstars, you'd imagine that it has to be present to a degree. And look, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I've never seen it, because there has certainly been some things where I've just rolled my eyes.
Of course.
And been like, give me a break. But it's also, I find it to be circumstantial. Like, a lot of times, I've spent so many hours of a day in a room with the superstar, a tiny little room where they're fucking up in front of me and they're not sounding good and they're not whatever and they're not. And then a day or two later, they'll be like braggadocio because there's some hot chicks in the room, or somebody, not necessarily that part, somebody from the news or somebody from the label or whatever. So it's almost like dealing with children in a way. It's like they're at, so you just gotta, like, again, back to, just personal skills. You got to roll your eyes and just say, okay, that's just part of it. It's like,
it's part of the deal.
Part of the deal. It's part of what they're selling. And it is just part of the deal. Yeah, it's funny. I'm lucky enough to say I haven't experienced it too much. And when I have or I do, you just got to know when to just kind of like, secretly roll your eyes and say, okay, this is funny.
Yeah, just deal with it. Once, a long time ago, when I went to Berkeley, Eddie Kramer gave a masterclass speech.
Awesome.
He was talking about all the cool people he worked with, and I asked him, what did they have in common? Like,
I knew you were going to...
Jimmy Page and Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, and you know what he said, which was really cool, and I want to hear your take on it, but what he said was, most artists can see like 10 feet ahead of them, but someone like Jimmy Page could see like 3 football fields ahead. Like, these guys, like, they just had this vision that is so huge and it's so far beyond everybody else that it made sense. They're like designed to be the way they are.
That's a brilliant answer, and it's brilliant analogy. It's brilliant on so many levels. Like, because I remember one, I was sitting down talking to a record company guy, that really, really good guy, and he's been in the business forever, like me. And now, I think he's president of a label right now. That's how long. He was just an underling in the beginning. And I remember him, we were sitting saying, he goes, you've worked with a lot of big people. Don't you feel, he started the sentence like, he said, don't you feel that the ones that are going to really, really do it and get to that level have that thing? And that's basically what Eddie's saying. It's like that thing, and it goes back to a lot of things that we're discussing here. It's like, yes, the obsession about what they're doing and the confidence.
Charisma.
Yeah, it's charisma, but it is knowing that thing. And that's where it almost becomes like a metaphysical thing, bro, where it's like, I bring that to like metaphysical in the sense of, how do they know that what they're doing is going to align with the interest and the desire of the populace to accept them as like that level of artistry? And I always go back to, because it still will blow my mind. I've sat and, I worked with Rick Rubin for many years, and we were talking about this once with, I don't remember who was in the room, and he was presenting, and he said it very well. It's like, the fact in that short, tiny window that 4 guys from Liverpool did what they did and made it happen in that creative sense, and it fucking blew the roof off of music and art and everything, and are still considered to that level. Like, how did it all align like that? Yeah, maybe they had that, 3 football field vision, but I also think it's like kind of like, you know what I mean by when I'm saying like the metaphysical thing? It's like it's almost like there's an awareness, like a subconscious, like third eye thing.
Yeah, like tapped into the collective unconscious, basically.
Yeah, boom. That's exactly what I'm saying. Well put, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Where there's a little bit of tapped into that where it's like they're not conscious of it at all. They're just doing it. And, Lennon and McCartney are writing that thing, and it's just like, how would they have known that? Because they were just a band. How would they have known that they go on the Ed Sullivan show and then, holy shit, and there you go, in that tiny little window of time, that everything would change. Everything would change. I think it's Eddie's answer, exactly that, and it's also that they're tapped in to something that, I don't know, it's deep.
Dude, I read the anthology book, and I remember one of the first things in there is John Lennon saying, and I'm paraphrasing, like, I'm a genius. I always knew I was a genius. Something along those lines.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when I hear people say that about themselves, I'm like, no, you're not. But the thing is, with John Lennon saying it, it's like, yeah, you're right.
But also, too, it goes back to all the things that we've been talking about where, okay, John Lennon said it, and we know what the word or the name, because now it is word, what John Lennon represents. But I'll bet you he had a lot of imposter syndrome. I'll bet you.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. I'll bet you all those things where, and that goes back to what you're saying about ego, where it's just like so many artists just say, I'm the shit. Because really, they don't think that they're the shit. So they think they got to say, I'm the shit to prove to everybody that like, oh, wait, they are the shit. So my point is that for Lennon to say that, it makes me kind of giggle because I can bet that when it was that little band playing in the bar in Germany for all those hours, it's just like, he didn't think that. He didn't think it was like, fuck it, I'm a genius. I shouldn't be in this bar. He was just doing it because, he was, working up his craft and all those things. And like, he got to that point where enough people had told him and, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's fascinating because I am by no means an expert on all the Beatles stuff and all the Beatle quotes and stuff. But, just back to the world of art and stuff. It's just like it's just funny because, yeah, I don't know. It's just fascinating.
When people talk about the luck factor, so I'm not a very big luck person.
Okay.
Like, I believe in making your own luck and all that stuff. But
yeah, I do too.
But I do think that there is a luck factor, and the luck factor is that you happen to be born at the exact right time for what you do to be tapped in.
Boom.
That part's not in your control.
Yes. I agree. And that goes back to something like what we're talking about with, Hendrix and, Zeppelin and the Beatles. It's just like, again, and that's what I meant by like the tapped into the subconscious, because if they would have happened 10 years earlier or 10 years later, it would have never happened. Would have never happened. In all those three examples, that's where it's just like, whoa, shit, just a line and then kaboom. And there you go. That is sort of, a fascinating thing to think about and talk about because it's a luck factor and it's just, it's wild.
It's a luck factor, but it doesn't take away from anything else, like in the work. Just out of curiosity, do you get into a different frame of mind when you're working with someone of that stature than, say, when you're working with a baby band, or is it just doing a session?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I usually, it's all the same to me, but I mean, you can't, I mean, inherently, it feels different.
Yeah.
Inherently. I'm still going to use, my same sense of quality, integrity, but inherently I got to tell you, it's a bit of when you make a record with somebody that's made, 10, 15, 20 records, whatever it is, or even, 3 or 4 or whatever, it's an because they've got their road tires tested and they've done it and they know it. And most importantly, and it goes back to what we're saying, that Shakespeare quote, knowing thyself, that's a really good thing. It may be the best thing and it goes back to Eddie Kramer's answer. these are examples of artists and people that know themselves, because if I'm working with a baby band that really knows what they want, it's the greatest thing in the world. Because, okay, this is what we're doing. But if I'm working with a baby band that's got or a new artist that's got their head, and, maybe it can sound like this, or maybe it can be this, or it's like, well, shit, you're right. Maybe it could. You want me to hold that vision? I'll hold that vision, and I'm going to make it like this way, but that's me. That's not, that's not you. Who do you want to be? Because I'll tell you something, honestly, anybody that approaches me, I've got, new artists I'm talking to right now, it's like they'll send me their demos, and I don't care if it's like 2-finger piano in a song. It's like, how do you hear yourself as an artist? And if you can't send me a bunch of links. Tell me how you hear this. Maybe it's about this one song, or maybe it's about all your songs, but how do you hear yourself? And if they don't know, and then it's like, well, keep digging, because you got to know. Because if you don't know, the world's not going to know.
It seems like some producers are totally cool with inventing the vision for the artist, but way more that I've spoken to definitely prefer the artist to have the vision.
Yeah, I'm fine to do it, but you know what I mean? But again, A, that's ego, and B, what happens if you've got the vision and then, you're a month in, and then all of a sudden they're like, wow, yeah, this is not me.
That's not what we wanted.
Yeah, this is not me. It's like, wait, I got to fucking do this all again? And then you're the bad guy. You know what I mean? It's like, everybody needs a little push and direction or whatever it might be. But no, man, it's like, of course, if you got, it's collaboration. The bottom line is it's always going to be a collaborative effort. Like we've been talking about this whole time. And again, it's you're always going to have to make it countless amounts of times to make it work. And I mean that in the sense of when you're, whatever is your role, even if you're co-writing and stuff, because they do so much of that now, and it's you're collaborating. But if someone's coming to you with the, as their project, my God, it seems kind of obvious that, the more they have a little bit of a sense of their vision, it's just so much easier,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, working under Rick Rubin.
Yes.
I'm sure you've been asked about him a lot, but I have to. I have to ask about him. What's that like? Because you hear so many stories, and what I understand about him is that he's kind of like a mastermind that has like a vision for what's best, and then he hires the best teams for that.
Yep.
Like is like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, it's very much that way. He also knows when to not be there, in a sense of to be the guy in the background and to always be there, because that's the beauty of my experience with him is that I met him. I was on a Macy Gray record, which was super fun, and I was called in. I can't remember if he called me in or not, but I had never worked with him before, and he got pulled in the record to be the executive producer because the record wasn't getting done. It was the second Macy Gray record, and she was taking way too much time, and she was intimidating the producer, and in the sense of like, oh, we got to keep recording and blah, blah, blah. And Sony was like, all right, there goes the budget. I love Macy to death. She's a genius and an incredible artist or whatever. But I ended up doing a couple of records with her after that too. But anyway, so that was my first experience with Rick, and his role was that, to kind of come in and save the day. He was executive producing and producing. He got both credits on the record, but he was coming in to like, okay, let's wrangle. And it was awesome to see how he would do that. And it was, like you said, he knows who to hire and how to like get the thing organized and, and to the, to the finish line. So again, it goes back to our whole conversation about organization, because it's very much something that I think he sees and understands. Because I think he saw like how freaking organized I was and how, of course, you count on me and blah, blah, blah. But the other thing is that, in terms of the mastermind and what I meant by like when to be present, when not to be present, some of the other projects I worked with him was the Johnny Cash record, the last one that he did before he passed away, which was Man Comes Around. And Rick was present and there at every moment of the recording process. Very, very, very involved. Because what he did with Johnny, which everyone knows now, it's historical, is like Johnny had gotten a little older, and Nashville sort of had turned a blind eye on this guy that was a legend. And Rick had that sonic vision and that artistic vision of like, all right, I'm going to present Johnny as who Johnny really is, which is just like in your face, conceptually and, sonically, in your face, him in a very stripped down arrangements of these incredible songs and that voice. And he accessed the fucking unbelievable power of the presence of that man and that artist. And that was incredibly visionary. But cut to me being involved with the Audioslave records, which was, he produced, executive produced, all this other stuff. And that was incredible because there was a scenario where Rick was not around for much of it. He was there for the pre-production with the bands and stuff. But my point is that he knew that these were guys that were so seasoned and knew, obviously these are legendary rock stars that knew what they wanted to do and how they were going to do it and whatever. And, pat myself on the back a little bit. He's like, puts a guy like me in the room to know to get the job done, that it would get the job done. So Rick would pop in every couple days or call me and ask me how it was going or blah, blah, blah. And it was that thing. And then, Rich Costi ended up mixing in. Of course, Rick was there and et cetera. But yeah, Rick's a fascinating, and that was also the era too where he was doing many projects at once, which blows me away how he could keep it all going at once, because he had his personal life that would be rolling too. But there you go. He's a mastermind in the sense of like he would hire really good guys to be doing the thing, and then he would come in the sessions at the most important moments to make a decision or to collaborate on the record with those decisions, and that would be that. Yeah, it's fascinating.
He's like a general or something. So
yeah,
I don't want to take up your whole day, but I do have a few questions here from the listeners, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So Danny Wallen.
Hello, Danny.
Hello, Danny. Danny's cool, from England. What form of psychology do you use when working with artists as big as Michael Jackson when trying to get the best performance out of them?
Great question. Really, really good question. Form of psychology. God, yeah, and it just goes to who you are as a person. You got to be knowing. And what I mean by that in a sense of like, there are certain people, look, every artist has an insecurity, many insecurities. But, I guess I spent enough time in studios with producers that I learned a lot about linguistics. There's one phrase I learned early on in my career that is so valuable, and I'd love to spread it to all y'all. And if you say to somebody, they did bad or they did terrible or they did semi-good. If you say to somebody, I know you can do better, or I think you can do better, it goes right to their own confidence and the fact that you understand that their ability is better than that. And it's not bullshit. It's like, I know you can do better. It's a wonderful practice you just have, in the room, in the production room all the time. Because, it's just, I hope it's the truth, but you know what I mean? When you present that to somebody, it's just like, because I've been present with, and I've heard all the stories about all those insanely negative things that people have said in rooms to artists or bands or whatever. And it's terrible. And it's also like counterproductive. How are things going to get better when you're like, that fucking sucked. Come on, guys, or whatever. It's just that's counterproductive. It's like, okay, well, let's think about doing it this way or blah, blah, blah. Or I'm a human and I've said enough incorrect things in the room, but for the most part, no. You got to know how to communicate with whomever it might be. I mean, my God, and when you're dealing with a level of like Michael, like I'm trying to remember what it was like, but God, then it's like a whole different, like, what the fuck? You don't say anything until like you are asked, in a sense of like, I remember like recording one vocal, and on the second take, Michael asked me, what'd you think of that? And then and it's like, what did I think of that? Hello. And then, you say, I don't know, you were a little like whatever. Then you might, because you're being asked, well, what did you think of that? Like you'd ask, anybody, you'd ask your cousin, hey, what'd you think of that? And then you should lend your opinion. I mean, you should always lend your opinion to a degree, but I hope I'm answering the question. I think I am.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you gotta know how to handle it. You really gotta know how to handle it. And look, I think, and that's not just in the studio. That's certainly in like pre-production room with the band or whatever it might be. I mean, God, I deal with that question daily. Like where a new artist gives me a bunch of songs and they really want to cut this one, or they think that that's the one on the record, and I'm like, no, it's not.
Not really.
Yeah, not really. And, you got to be, you're the person that's giving them perspective, realistic perspective. And that's just a difficult thing to do. Then it becomes that terrible thing about like, I know y'all out there have something on like YouTube and it's like the this and the this. Oh my God. That's the scariest thing in the world.
Oh God. The thumbs up, thumbs down. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and look, again, back to my wife. My wife's been acting her whole life and whatever. She still fucking reads the critiques on everything. And it just crushes her. And I constantly tell her, why? Just don't read it, because everybody's got a fucking opinion. And again, it's creativity and art. And like I was telling you about that one cartoon that she's in, and she's like, oh my God, it got panned. I'm like, what are you kidding me? I'm like, that's hysterical. I watched like, I binge watched it. It's the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen. I'm like, you care about like one dude panning it? I'm sure it's a failed animator that wrote honestly, the journalistic piece. Yeah. Which is, it's just like, man, to be a critic is what's the adage about that? It's just to be I don't know. There's a whole thing about being a critic. It's like, it's the worst thing in the world, because everybody's a critic and they shouldn't be.
Why do you want to take your time out of your day to tear somebody down? That's the part I don't get.
It's got to be because you don't feel good about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, here's one from Toby William Allen. The System of a Down, Steal This Album rhythm guitar tone has been a holy grail for me, Mr. Jack in particular. How did you manage to create a sound that is so crushing and heavy, yet so crisp and clear?
Oh, God, you're going to hate me, bro, because I don't remember.
Oh, that's okay.
I don't remember, although I remember that it wasn't that complicated. I can tell you.
Probably because the dude's a sick player.
Yeah, he's an unbelievable player. It was a Marshall GCM, I guess, and in a 412. It's about the miking of the cabinet. And back then, it was sort of the beginning of recording a DI at the same time, which I always do now, which everybody always does. And so you could reamp if need be. I don't remember if we did. We might have at that time. And, and we weren't Pro Tools at that stage. So I can tell you that there wasn't a lot of effects processing before the amp. In other words, not a lot of pedals. He was not into all that stuff, which was ironic because right now I'm in the middle of a record and there's at least 150 pedals in my studio. It's ridiculous. It's
Jesus.
Yeah. But this style of music and what they do, it's like very experimental, like a lot of crazy. It's like, I don't know. It's insane, but it's fun. A lot of fun. Yeah, to answer your question, just God, A's a great player, and B, it was a Marshall. And Les Paul, I believe? I don't remember. He's mostly Les Paul player. If I'm not, I may be wrong about this, but yeah, an incredible player. And, talk about a visionary.
Man, I feel like with guitar tone, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is who the hell is playing the guitar?
Yeah, because it's that, and then they get to a point where they've spent enough time in Guitar Center or wherever they've played in different amps, and they know what their sound will be. Or how it will be.
So I have another podcast called the Riff Hard Podcast because my other site is a guitar school.
Oh, my God.
And we have a podcast as well. And we were talking to a guitar player named Nick Johnston yesterday, who's phenomenal. He said the exact same thing because he does clinics all over the world. Yeah. And, when you're in Latvia, you don't know what the fucking gear you're going to get is you're always getting something different every single night. And his answer is, well, I've played through enough amps to know exactly what I have to do to sound like me. I just know at this point. So same answer.
Yeah.
All right, let's see here. This one is kind of complex, but I can tell that he really wants this answered. From Javier Noyola. Okay. What was the biggest quote unquote cultural barrier besides language in terms of recording, producing, and mixing big Latin American acts such as Manya or Jesse and Joy, if there even was one? Because as a Mexican, I can say that the way people work and sound we try to achieve over here is heavily influenced by American producers and mixers, but industry practices seem to differ in some aspects. My question is geared towards that side. As someone who wants to collaborate with other people around the world, it's always amazing to listen to advice from producers that have a hand in creation of Latin American pop rock.
What an amazing question. Very well written and well put. I want to answer it. I'll tell you, quite simply is there's not a lot of difference. And I'm not oversimplifying it to answer your question, but it's like music is music. And, in the studio is in the studio. And you're just there making great stuff. I mean, I think sometimes the industry gets a little like wah, wah, in a different way occasionally, but it gets a little wah, wah here too. And what I mean by that is you'll get
sure does.
Yeah. So it's just a different wah, wah. So that might be the most brilliant thing I've said all day. To answer your question, that's really what it is. It's not that different. And if you're asking because I think just to gain more insight and awareness and stuff, it's like there's cultural barriers, but I don't know. I think especially nowadays too, I think all the cultural differences are things that are luckily falling away, especially in this world of like art and creativity and music and the beauty of things. Thank God we're getting borderless.
Just do great work.
Yeah. And it's like the whole world is like we're talking about borders this and borders that and blaming a country in Asia for a terrible pandemic. Of course, things start in different places in the world, but why we've got to blame and segregate people and all this bullshit. It's like the happiest thing in the world I can say in answer to your question or in relation to your question is like, it's beautiful that there's less cultural divide. It really is. And trust me, I make records in America and I make records in Spain and in Mexico and the blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, yeah, like you said, just do great work and, it's going to be all, and it depends on the person too. I mean, what I mean by that is the project, not only the artist, but it's like, again, I've had weird business scenarios making an American record with the label or the whoever might be making the record. If it's a backer or blah, 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 as I've had with, Mexican labels and projects. It's just.
Yeah, there's going to be situations to overcome no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah. Final question. This is from Enrique de la Paz.
Oh, cool.
How was the experience of working with Audioslave? Did you get to record Chris's vocals? I once had read that he liked to record them by himself late at night.
Okay. The experience was amazing. Yes, I got to record Chris's vocals very frequently.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Chris was an amazing guy and heartbreaking. The end of the story.
Absolutely.
Very heartbreaking. What an amazing artist on many levels. And we got to be quite chummy, and I can get deep into those stories, but that's a whole nother thing.
Next podcast.
Yeah, exactly. He had his demons, but incredible artist. So yes, I recorded Chris's vocals a lot, and it was amazing, and it wasn't always perfect. There you go. And when it wasn't perfect, I'm going to go back to the other question that was asked to me. How did I communicate with him about that? Well, I didn't have to, because when Chris did something that wasn't perfect, he beat himself up so much that it was almost me on the other side. I've been
He did it for you.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how often, it wasn't that often, but he would come in. He had a fucking tendency, which was very frustrating, where he wouldn't warm up for whatever reason. He frequently wouldn't warm up. And he'd just walk in and he'd show up and, hey, man, and I'd be in the studio, ready to go. He'd walk in the booth and expect to do a Chris Cornell vocal. And sometimes he would, but very often he wouldn't. And it ended up with him losing his temper and himself, throwing the headphones down, storming out of the studio. All those things would happen. And it was frustrating, mostly for him, because I saw a guy and it sucked. But, I think that was also like personal things that he was experiencing that might have been frustrating, because eventually he got back to, oh my God, I got to get back to my vocal coach and warm up for 20 minutes before I try to record this, 3-octave, not 3-octave, but you know what I mean, vocal that is going to be record quality. He was also a perfectionist, of course, because he was Chris Cornell, and as he should be. Oh, in answer to your question about him recording himself, the second record, I did the first Audioslave one, their debut record. He didn't record any of himself on that. On the second one, by the end of the record, he wanted to, because he started to think about it, and he's like, hey, what if you set me up in the room? He didn't know anything about Pro Tools, and we were off tape at that point of those records. He's like, what if you set me up and you show me how to record, and I could start recording myself. So I would say like a third of that record was him on headphones recording in the booth, in the control room, like Prince always did and stuff. And I said, sure, dude, because that was, again,
It's Chris Cornell.
It's Chris Cornell, and it's also the finish line. It's like whatever's going to make him feel like not nervous or confident and wanting to be alone, because I will tell you, it's another thing too. When it got to final vocal time, the band were never there. They also, because of the nature of that band, it was a super group. I mean, you had Rage Against the Machine, and then you had Chris Cornell. And ironically, it's very funny. In the beginning, that's how the project was called. It was literally all the tapes said RATMCC. That's every fucking tape. And this was, again, before Pro Tools. We got to Pro Tools in the end of it. But it was like every tape said, because they didn't have a name, which was very funny. But yeah, he just got the end and he was like, hey, what if you set me up and I just did my own vocals? And I said, yeah, man, let's do it. So I gave him a quick Pro Tools lesson, because it's fairly easy when you're talking about just recording one track of vocals. And I set him up, and I gave him a little recording lesson. It was like, don't touch this, don't touch the preamp and the compressor, blah, blah, blah. And I taught him a little bit about making playlists and stuff. Now, there you go. Back to the other thing we were talking about. When he finished, of course, I had to go back because it was audio 1, audio 2. Blah, blah, blah. I had to label everything. But by the end, he really got it, when he was just doing choruses, and he'd write stuff down for me. So, yeah, I mean, there was probably like 3 or 4 or 5 songs by the end of that record that he was recording alone, and it worked out fine, because it at the end of the day, he would say, okay, this one's my favorite, and this is one of my favorite, because I was responsible for making the vocal composites. So, there, do the thing. And, for those songs, I wasn't even present to what he might have thought. I was out in the hallway because he wanted like a little bit of privacy. So if I would be out in the hallway and he'd say, okay, track 3 in the verse I liked, and the this and the that. So there you go. My responsibility in those records were unique in a sense of like, I'd put the composite together and he'd hear it. He'd get, final say so about it. And then Rick would hear it and say, okay, this is great, or it's not great. Here's what I think. So they would have to see, kind of get a, vision. So it's kind of like I was the first producer in a way, but then of course it had to be approved by artists. And it's very similar to the way it's done now. That obviously answers the question of how it went down.
It does. A couple things that come to mind off of what you said is, I forget who told me this, somebody awesome, but that part of production is knowing when to get the fuck out of the way. Great producer knows when to get the fuck out of the way.
That is exactly it. And that's probably one of the biggest things I learned from Rick Rubin. And what to do. When people ask me like that don't know anything about the music business, what does a music producer do? And we use that analogy, well, it's like a director, like a movie director. Those guys definitely know when the fuck to get out of the way. Because if you're Spielberg or Coppola or all these greats, and they see like some actors doing their thing, and it's like mind-bendingly past what they had envisioned, the best ones know when to get out of the way. And I think that's the thing about us too. It's like if something's happening and like it's not exactly what you thought it might be, but they're doing something, it's like you better just get the fuck out of the way.
Let Chris Cornell be Chris Cornell.
Yeah, and it goes back to like what Quincy Jones, one of those famous quotes he said, it's like you can have all the ego in the world, but when you walk through that door that's in the studio, you leave the ego right there. I don't give a fuck who you are, and him included, was his point. It's like, doesn't matter. Ego's at the door. We're in here to make music, to, honor that woman that is what music is, the analogy of a woman being music and stuff, and the song. And it's just like, that's what's it. And thus, what you're saying is when to get the fuck out of the way. I remember, this is a great Rick story if you want to end with this one, but
yeah,
we were in New York finishing up a Macy Gray record. It got to the point where she just taken a lot of time and she was starting her tour, so we had to finish the mixes in New York. And again, I adore Macy, but a lot of artists get to be procrastinators where they don't want to finish because they're afraid or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson was the consummate procrastinator. That's why sometimes his record would take 3-4 years, blah, blah, blah. It's just like, because a lot of times you don't want to finish. It's so much fun making the shit. Why finish? Because then the critics are coming out. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Anyway, we were finishing mixes. And Rick wasn't there. We were in New York. It was Dave Way and myself. We were working on the mixes and stuff. And Macy was starting her tour. We were all in the same hotel, but she was in rehearsals with the band. But we had to make sure that Macy wasn't stopping by the studio where we were working. So we had to make sure she heard the mixes. So I remember Rick called us one day. And it's like, did Macy hear the mix? We're like, no. Like, we couldn't get her to come down to the studios. And he's like, all right, here's what you got to do. You've got to, and this sounds so unbelievably simplistic, but it's perfectly on the nose in the best way. He's like, here's what you got to do. And we were in the studio at the time. It was like 2 a.m, whatever, and a deadline. And I know I'm forgetting a lot of details, but the point of the story is a funny one. He's like, make sure that in her room, there's a hi-fi system where she can listen to a CD, whatever. This is the era of CDs. Okay, so call the hotel, blah, blah, blah. Okay, there's no CD player in her room. Fuck, what are we going to do? Okay, Rick, there's no CD. Okay, send somebody out to go get a boombox. Which one? It doesn't matter. Okay, so we had the assistant on the session. Okay, go get a boombox. Get 2 or 3 boomboxes. Have them bring it to the hotel, concierge, open up her fucking room, put the boomboxes in there, play it. Okay, plug it all in. Okay, great. It's just like, all right, make sure that, okay, we call Macy. All right, Macy, you got some boomboxes now. Okay, great. All right, so we send the CD over. It's like, okay, and Rick called the next day. Did she hear it? I don't know. I can't find her. Okay, get a hold of her, blah, blah, blah. Make sure, So I'm making sure that she's in the room at midnight that next night. The CD's there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, Macy, did you hear the mix? It is. It's hysterical. Did you hear the mix? Yeah. Okay, you got some comments and points? She's like, yeah, I wrote them down. Okay, I'll see you at the studio tomorrow. And she did come down. And I remember Rick saying, you know what that is? And I'm like, what? He's like, that's producing records.
Yeah.
Like, it had nothing to fucking do. Yeah. Like, I had to make sure that a fucking concierge could get a boombox into her room so she could, you got to feed the animal a little bit to just get to the end of the prize. But, it's a cute story. It's a funny story, but it's the truth. And I learned.
It's whatever it takes.
Whatever it fucking takes.
So what was the thing you wanted to say?
Oh, I always like to say this, especially to younger folks, that, I think about it. I try to think about it daily, but I know that it's necessary to me daily. And it's about, and this may seem obvious, but it's about perspective. Because I find that taking breaks, especially in our line of work, we'll sit and we'll work for 12, 13 hours a day, and we don't get any perspective. As important as knowing the compressors and knowing the mics and knowing the band and knowing the music, blah, 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 blah. The most important thing to do is take breaks and get perspective. Like, leave whatever you're doing for however long you need to do. And I mean that in a macro sense. It's like if you've been working on a record for 6-8 months and you're a band and you have no perspective anymore, then maybe not listen to it for a good week. Because when you come back to it, I guarantee you're going to have a different perspective. And that perspective might be like, holy shit, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Or this is just shite and I need to throw it away. Because I guarantee you, all those artists that we've been talking about, you know, the Lennons, the McCartneys, the Page and Plants and Hendrix, they all had that, where they would be able to pull themselves away from something long enough to come back to it and make a really good judgment call.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I wanted to toss that out there because I find that
Thank you.
invaluable to myself and my work.
Absolutely. Well, Thom, thank you so much for coming on. It's been fucking awesome talking to you.
Dude, it's been super fun. Super fun. I knew it would be, but like this went way beyond.
Yeah, man, it was an absolute pleasure. So thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And if anybody has other questions, you know where to find me. It's an easy world with the internet. So, you know, go on Instagram or blah, blah, blah.
I appreciate it. Okay, then. Another URM podcast episode in the bag. Please remember to share our episodes with your friends, as well as post them to your Facebook, Instagram, or any social media you use. Please tag me at EYAL URM Audio. And of course, please tag my guests as well. Till next time, happy mixing.
You've been listening to the Unstoppable Recording Machine podcast. To ask us questions, make suggestions, and interact, visit urm.academy and press the podcast link today.